wouldn't call it break NFL. Dalvin Cook is on a plane. He will meet with the Jets in a day or two. And you couple that with Aaron Rodgers taking a major pay cut. Maybe Breece Hall isn't as healthy as you think. Who knows?
I hate that team.
The Jets?
I haven't rooted against something like this in a long time.
I agree. I'm all for rooting against the Jets.
J-E-T-S, Jets.
One of the greatest chants.
Yes.
Annoying if you're on the other sideline, but.
We were talking about PJ Fleck. We have some ticket texts. I coach high school football at Walled Lake Western. We sent 2 kids to Minnesota this season, Darius Taylor and Drew Viato. Both have nothing in capitals, but great things to say about Fleck. We know his energy and culture is unique, but he isn't a Richard like he's made out to be. Him and Kirk Soraka, the offensive coordinator, showed up to a game, stood on our sidelines. He went around and introduced himself. Okay. It's just, like I said, the standing ovation thing just is really weird.
Yeah.
I don't find wanting a standing ovation any less creepy or weird than refusing to take off your cleats at someone else's home. But you guys laugh and say that's horrible. Oh, well, that's just PJ. You know what? I tend to agree.
I would agree with that.
I would agree with that. That's weird.
Wait, you can't agree with that.
What's that? That it's weird?
Yeah.
It's weird.
I know. Just...
The 2 fakest coaches.
They won't listen to that in the afternoon.
The 2 fakest coaches in college are Fleck and Dabo. That's Mike and Williamston.
Gee, all golly.
Mm-hmm.
Some about him. He was the first. Maybe PJ Fleck, instead of standing ovation, is just looking for energy for his team in the meeting room. Maybe it's not such a narcissistic thing. I'm sure maybe that's why. It just, I don't know, to demand basically a standing ovation every time you walk into the room, or at least clap and applaud you.
Okay, well, so look at it from the coach's perspective. Do you want to walk into a group of 18 to 22-year-olds who are kicked back in their chairs, their hats on backwards, or pull hoodies on? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of those things, but the presentation of, am I ready for this meeting? There's one that you get when everybody is kicked back, feet on the chairs in front of them, versus when you come in and you see some energy. Now all of a sudden guys sit down, they're maybe on the edge of their seat, they're at least sitting up straight, and you feel like maybe you're going to be a little more productive in that meeting than if they were just all kicked back.
Okay, maybe he comes in, and instead of the standing ovation, they are in their hoodies, they lay back, and he goes, all right, time to work, let's go. And everybody would prop up
Snap
to
attention.
Yes.
Well, you would like to think that would happen, but
Yes.
this could be one of those things where, and we're not in the program, does this happen every single time? Does this happen in August 1st? Does it happen November 1st?
Right. Note to self, bet the under for Minnesota Gophers total wins this year. Fleck is a nut, and that cult will fall apart. Everything Fleck does might be subconsciously training discipline.
That's what I think it is. I just think some of this is over the top, But look at, wasn't it Belichick that you were late if you weren't there 5 minutes early?
Coughlin,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, Coughlin, and you couldn't wear shorts in the hotel lobby. Like, there are different rules that different coaches have about travel, about going into a meeting, about how you present yourself, how you are ready to, for success.
And I think the 5-minute thing was a little over the top, but I have no problem with saying, listen, when our meeting starts at 8 a.m., we're going at 8 a.m. We're starting at 8 a.m., meaning, okay, the laid back and the chatting with the teammates, to shut it down and be ready. I think that's a good thing.
But I agree with you. But this is different. This is making it about himself, I believe.
I agree. I think it's too much.
Right.
I mean, I bet it was really weird at first when he did the standing ovation thing and kind of said, okay, this is the way it's going to be around here. I bet it's normal now.
Everything Fleck does might be subconsciously training a discipline. Ha, 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 ha. Did I just hear a Michigan guy call someone else's program a cult? That's too funny. I'd say a toxic culture would include allowing a player on gun charges to get on the team playing the same day. Well, I agree with that part of it. Well, somebody else doesn't.
No.
I played high school football, and even at that level, there were cultish aspects to teams. It's just how football is to some extent. Yeah, we saw cultish behavior, allegedly, at Northwestern.
You think PJ Fleck allows his players to eat hamburgers?
Well, as long as it doesn't touch their fries.
Right. He doesn't pay for it.
Yes. How about reading the rest of the article, guys? Many players calling the accusations a hit piece, fake news, typical media overhype.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm
Right.
not saying we're not necessarily agreeing with it.
No.
And yeah, there is a former player, defensive back, Connie. I don't know if it's Connie or Coney Durr. It's not for everybody. You have to be ready to go through that. It's a program, and over time, you get acclimated to what's going on. There's a lot of terminology he uses that is a little different. It can be like a foreign language. You know, and again, that's why I say when you're being recruited, like PJ Fleck, you can like, dislike, and whatever you want. He is who he is, and he is that way every second of the day. So when you're being recruited by him, this is something that you know going in. That's why I said that, because I don't think this borders on toxic environment.
I don't think it's toxic at all. I think, just like I said,
It's
the
an acquired
8,000
taste, and you've got to be one that's open to acquiring it.
Like I said, all those acronyms that you listed, okay, that's fine. It's this. I just can't see in 2023 a coach at a college football team demanding he get a standing ovation from his players.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing
That to
too
me is bizarre.
yeah.
The other stuff is fine. Every coach has their weird things. I mean, God, well, look, we said it 1,000 times. I mean, who's got it better than us? Nobody. Even when you were like 2-4. I mean, that's ridiculous too sometimes.
Yeah, and you want to call it a hit piece, whatever. The article's not necessarily a hit piece because it gives both sides.
Yes.
It's the headline: former players, staff reveal troubling allegations of toxic culture under PJ Fleck. I mean, is this the start of somebody trying to cancel PJ?
Now,
I agree, and that kind of goes to what they said, a media hit piece and all that.
Right. Maybe
I really question if we're talking about this or know about this if the Pat Fitzgerald thing didn't happen. That I think there's part of the media that's desirous to pile on top of stories that are controversial and try to find the other one.
In fairness, we just mentioned the weird stuff. We didn't mention the other stuff about that some players said it's fine.
Yeah.
So I'll take that criticism on. That's accurate. Our telephone number is 248-539-9797. Coming up next, what do you have more faith in? The Lions winning right now, or a long-term plan of management? 97.1 The Ticket. Thank you very much, Chris. 248-539-9797. AJ Hinch at 9:35. The Tigers do play a doubleheader this afternoon right here on your home of Detroit Tiger baseball.
The main deal.
97.1 the main deal.
Rebranding. So you asked the question before we went to break. What do you have more faith in right now? The Lions win the division and a playoff game this year. I don't want to say instant. Success right now, in the moment, versus the Lions ownership, front office, you put those together, coaching staff, and that they're building for long-term sustained success. You think that this is a team that it's a one-off, that they're going to hit their peak this year, next year, and then they tail off, they ride into the sunset? Or is this a team under Brad Holmes, under Sheila Hemp-Ford, that is going to be building for long-term success? And the reason I asked that question is there was a recent article put out about the NFL. We always talk about the Power Index, Futures Power Index. And here's how they rated it. They used the quarterback situation along with the remaining roster, not including the quarterback, draft ability and draft capital, the front office, and coaching, using a scale where 100% is A+ elite, 90% is great, 80% is very good, C is average, 70 is average, 60 is very bad, and 50 or below is disastrous.
Okay.
Of the teams in the NFL, 32 of them, where do you think the Lions ranked? Talking about all those different things, adding them all into one big ball, the quarterback situation, the roster, draft ability, capital, front office, and coach.
I would give it probably the good one, with not 100. I'd give it, like, if I'm giving 85, something like that.
Pretty accurate. They had a score of 82.6.
Okay.
So very good.
Yeah.
And the worst that they had was an 80, which is their draft. And some of that in terms of, so the capital, they've used a lot of their draft capital.
Right.
There are a couple of first-round picks they got from the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff trade. And they've used them on picks that need to pay off, like Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, the first-round picks, and still waiting on
Laporta. Actually, the fact that they drafted guys at positions that a lot of people don't think are valued where they should be.
Right, and Jamison Williams hasn't done anything yet since he was drafted, in the first round. And so they rank at number 11 amongst NFL teams. The Dallas Cowboys were just in front of them at 10. The San Francisco 49ers and the Jacksonville Jaguars were tied at 8-9. Pittsburgh, classy organization, has always had success at
young quarterback, rookie deal.
At 7. Seattle Seahawks at 6.
They have a plethora of young players besides their quarterback, who's not a young player. But I mean, you look at where their defense from last year. Where all those mid-round draft choices became really, really good. Woolen, among others. And they brought back some veterans for this year. But, they're recreating the Legion of Boom there.
And
they really concern me.
You know what? The closer we get to the season, the closer I am to – when the schedule came out, I made my prediction. I predicted that they would beat Kansas City in Kansas City and then lose to Seattle. I am concerned about that Seattle game. And I understand that, the perception of beating Kansas City would be great. But the ramifications of losing to Seattle would be greater than beating Kansas City.
Right, because it's a division. It's a conference game. Yes.
Right. Tied at 3 and 4 are the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. At 2 is the Cincinnati Bengals. And at 1 is the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sorry, I messed up the counting at some point. The Kansas City Chiefs are 2, and Philadelphia Eagles are at 1.
It's weird with the Eagles because, they have a good young rookie quarterback. They got young, really good wide receivers. Their offensive line is not young. I mean, a couple of them are. Dickerson and Muliata are pretty young. But, I mean, you lose Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey. Up front, yes, they hope that our good friend Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis can play well because up front they're freaking old.
Well, they are, but it's also this is the totality of this, and it also goes to draft, front office.
Yeah, Howie Roseman's done a really good job.
Yep, front office. They're ranked right now as the number one front office in the NFL by their standards here. And we've seen what they've done in the draft. We saw it last year in terms of, A.J. Brown was the only guy on the offense that they didn't draft of their 11 starters.
Right.
So they've been able to draft well. They've been able to look into the future, create draft capital. They're in the Super Bowl, and yet they already have, 2 first-round picks to add to their, plethora of talent. So they've done a really good job.
Yes, they have.
Going back to the question is, do you have more faith that this is a team that could win this year versus a team that is putting something together that is stable and can have sustained success?
Now, you're talking about win this year, because you can do both, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to play Wojo here. I have more faith in the long-term success than I do of the short-term, because I believe the strength of this football team is their young players, and you would assume that the young players, and it is assumption, that they're going to get better.
They're going to get better, and they're also, we talked about, Laporta, and how are the expectations too high for him this year? And maybe somebody has too high of expectations for him. Others, maybe they're a little bit more reasonable. But if you answer like you did, that they are set for, or they looks like they're becoming set for long-term success, to have a number of years where they're consistently in the playoffs, they make a playoff run, maybe they take a shot at a Super Bowl. If you answer yes to that, then if this year they fall short and they're another 9-7 to 9-8 team, or they're 10-7, it can be a little bit easier to swallow, because how did they get there? Was it a key injury
Right, exactly.
that cost them that? Yet, okay, they're set up because Brad Holmes has drafted well.
Right. Did they lose to a team that's much better than them? Those type of things. You have to see how the game's played out. And more importantly, you have to see, okay, we're disappointed we finished 9-8 or 10-7. But Sewell got better. Hutchinson got better. Houston got better. All their young players continued to get better. And maybe you get an answer that you don't want on Jared Goff, and then you realize, you know what, we got to do better at the quarterback position.
And I think it's long term too, for sure, because I think Brad Holmes knows what he's doing. I think he drafted to try to put Jared Goff in the best position to win, and if they don't, then they know they have to address that issue. I also think too, just the long term fact that you're not going to be paying. I thought they paid okay for Montgomery. It's only 3 years. Like, you don't have a ton of money gobbled up in tight end, linebacker, or running back.
You're not looking in the next 2 years in terms of, what are we going to do with the salary cap?
Exactly. So now you can draft to replenish the important places like defensive line and offensive line and possibly quarterback. And you've also got the money to pay them too on who you want to keep and not keep. I do think there's going to come a time where either Decker or Ragnow, they're going to have to probably move on.
Right. Well, they're going to have to draft a guard this draft already.
You would think so.
Because Vaitai
already missed some time.
Yes, and Glasgow's short term, right?
Right, and he was brought in to be more of the, hey, you can play guard, and we want you to back up guard and center position.
Correct.
Not necessarily start at guard, and then if something happens to Frank, hey, we're going to move you in and bring somebody else in at guard position. That's where, they might be a little bit thin, and they're still building for that long-term success.
I mean, I think, look, every team's trying to win every year, and that's what they're going to tell you. But I really think they're positioned for next year, not this coming season. Not that there's a ceiling, that if everything comes together. But I really believe it. Some of these guys getting in their second year, seasoning, Hutchinson in his third, Sewell in his fourth, and it's Goff's last year under contract. They're really pushing for next year to maybe make some all-in off-season moves.
Well, they're going to have to make that decision on Jared. I don't see him getting into the last year of his contract without a definitive answer of yes or no.
Oh, I think the tag is in play here. If they just keep getting what they're getting out of him, and you're sort of stuck in that in between, that the tag is really in play for at least the first year, and because they won't try to force it at QB.
I don't think they will either. I mean, they're going to hope that Hooker becomes really, really good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they drafted him in the third round. Our telephone number is 248-539-9797. AJ Hinch at 9:35. By the way, speaking of the Tigers, later this hour, your chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to see the Tigers take on the Tampa Bay Rays. That team's been struggling a little bit. Saturday, August 4th. For ticket information, call 866-66-TIGER or visit tigers.com. Be the 8th caller when you hear Heather Park say, "There goes Snoopy and Heather." You'll be the 8th caller. You'll win those tickets to see the Tigers and the Rays. 97 won the ticket.
Hey, if you've been struggling to lose weight, you got to give Ideal You a call. You can lose up to 40 pounds in 40 days using real whole foods. 80% of guys that do the Ideal You program lose 30 pounds or more in just 40 days. Sign up now and get $200 in free groceries or a $200 Visa gift card. It's your choice. Book your free consultation right now at idealu.us. Ideal You is different than other weight loss programs, and here's why. It works, and it works fast. You get instant results. I lost 10 pounds in the first 10 days. In those 40 days, I lost about 50 pounds, and I'm down over 60 pounds now. It's not shakes, bars, prepackaged foods. You eat real whole food every day. That's why you're able to stick with this. It becomes more of a lifestyle than just a diet. They teach you what to eat and drink to lose weight. You're going to be in constant contact with a weight loss coach on a daily basis in your 40 days. And once you've reached your goal, they're going to teach you how to keep it off. Ideal You will help you lose up to 40 pounds in 40 days. Sign up now and get $200 in free groceries or a $200 Visa gift card. Book your free consultation right now at idealu.us.
248-539-9797. That is the telephone number and the ticket text. AJ Hinch at 9:35. Hard to believe, John, that the biggest SEC slap Richard of all time, Paul Feinbaum, who actually I find very entertaining.
Sure, we can find him entertaining.
Yes.
Still not like him.
Yeah, I actually don't mind him. I just think it's his shtick, and that's what he does. And whatever. And he loves trolling Michigan fans and Michigan coaches, particularly Jim Harbaugh. Now, with all the controversy, if you even want to call it that, over the 4-game alleged suspension that Harbaugh is going to get for, improprieties that were done during COVID, breaking the COVID law of recruiting and coaching and all sorts of stuff. And, of course, there's the allegations of the burger at the Brown Jug that he allegedly, there's supposedly receipts, allegedly, that he bought players, which is not allowed. Anyway, so the NCAA, we believe, is going to suspend him for 4 games, and those 4 games being the Pirates of East Carolina, UNLV, the Runnin' Rebs, and, of course, Bowling Green and the Falcons of Bowling Green and the Scarlet Knights of Rutgers. Now, there are some people that I saw, Christopher Mad Dog Russo, thought it was a joke. I mean, what kind of suspension is that? It's nothing. There's no teeth to it. And then there are others who believe it's ridiculous. You shouldn't even be suspended at all. Here is Paul Feinbaum yesterday on Get Up. And, man, this is definitely off script for Paul Feinbaum. The NCAA has turned into a joke. Whether
It's been that way for a long time.
Yes, whether you believe Harbaugh should have, like I do, just signed what he had to sign, if that was even in play, and just gotten it over with. I believe that would have been the right thing to do, but John and I, we disagree on what we think is the right thing to do when it comes to a lot of things. Michigan, I thought the right thing to do with Mozzie Smith was hold him out of the Indiana game.
I think you are, as Greg said yesterday, conflict averse. And you don't want to have to answer questions that may be difficult to answer, but the right thing to do may be to play this out. And, call the NCAA hey, prove it. Make them show the receipts. Make them show that they have something, and it's not just, hey, being reported by somebody else.
Well, you assume if they want him to, if this stuff is accurate where he won't sign anything, you're not going to sign something if you have no proof. I agree with that, but there has to be some sort of proof that they went to him with, that this has been going on and on and on, where it would have been over a long time ago from the school's perspective.
Well, so just acquiesce and get it over with.
If the school obviously was along with it, it was just Harbaugh, basically, right?
Well,
that's what we're led to believe, that Harbaugh is the one who held this thing up so long.
Yeah, and so
he's still holding it up. So he's going to
just acquiesce so you can get it over with.
Yeah,
even if you disagree. And I'm not going to go down the same road because we did this yesterday.
But my point is, if they have proof, what else? What are you fighting for?
Well, we don't know.
I said if.
Yeah.
That's why I want to see exactly what the proof is. If they're just saying it's hearsay, then yes, you know what? I'll apologize. Say, he shouldn't have done that. But I believe that to me, that this has gone on for
as long as it has.
Yes.
And now we're starting training camp. I think Michigan reports the first practice is, I believe, the second.
Yeah.
And this is the NCAA has promised that within 30 days, and the clock apparently started a few days ago, they will have the final decision on this.
Mhm.
So it will happen before the regular season begins.
Yes. Look, there's been investigations into Michigan for ridiculous things before. The whole thing with Rich Rod was ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you talk about a crazy thing, they practiced too hard. They said they certainly didn't practice the right way.
There wasn't a lot of success to go along with it, yes.
Yes.
The cupboard was just bare.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, I don't know if you guys are interested or focused in on NFL every year, NFL Network, NFL.com, whatever. They have players, and all their players vote for the top 100 players of the season going into the season.
Right.
And they've revealed the top 71 thus far. There is one Detroit Lion so far, and that is at number 88, which is Aiden Hutchinson.
Oh, after a rookie season.
After his rookie season.
It's been a few years since we've had a Lion on this list.
I think Ragnow was on 1 year. I don't remember. But what's interesting about this, and today at noon, I think.
So it's the top 71 have been revealed,
Yes.
or up to 71?
The up through 71. I think the top 10 is obviously the last ones they do.
Yeah.
So today, I believe 51 through 70 are going to be revealed, something like that.
Okay, so 100 through 71 have been revealed.
Correct.
Okay.
Here's
so
my
the
query.
bottom 30.
Yeah, here's my question. Lamar Jackson is 72 on the list.
Okay.
And I get he's coming off an injury.
Couple.
You can't tell me there are 71 players in the National Football League better than Lamar Jackson. I just don't believe it.
Well, I guess it depends on availability when it means the most.
I guess that's what
Last couple of
players
years.
Players are the ones who are voting. It's not some media creation here.
Right. And so if it's, where does he rank amongst quarterbacks? He's not going to be in the top 5, obviously.
No.
Probably not going to be in the top.
The other quarterbacks that have been released so far, Geno Smith is at 77. Tua is at 82. Justin Fields at 86. And Trevor Lawrence is at 96.
So from a player's perspective, who else do you think will be on this list for the Lions? I don't think Hutch will be the only one.
No, I think Sewell will be on that list.
Sewell,
I think
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
St. Brown probably, but there's no definite. Garrett Wilson is 74. That's the highest rated receiver that's been revealed thus far.
Jared Goff.
That's what I was going to say. If Geno Smith's on this list,
If Justin Fields is on that list.
shouldn't Jared Goff be on that list? And if he's not, I think the players are missing the boat there.
Well, that's been the collective, though, on the Lions, period, with all these offseason lists this year. No, the thing is they've got a lot of talent, but it's just good talent.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, and while I won't put a ceiling on what the season is that this time next year, these lists, you're going to have Hutchinson, Sewell, and St. Brown in the top 25.
Hopefully, yeah.
Should.
Yes.
Well, that they can go there. And
Yeah.
that's my biggest hope for why this team could really be good this year.
Right. Actually,
We don't know how good these guys are yet. They're not in their prime.
Right. And if James Houston continues his progression of, 8 sacks in 7 games, I would expect that maybe not, he doesn't rocket up the board, but if he has that ratio, yeah, he's going to be on the list.
And if Ragnow has a good, healthy season, he'll probably be on the list next year, too. Actually, 61 through 70 get revealed today
Okay.
at 12 o'clock.
So we'll have about 40 guys ranked by the players at the end of today.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of today, the Tigers have a doubleheader today against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Shohei Ohtani going up against Michael Lorenzen. All-Star versus All-Star. And you can hear it right here on 97.1 The Ticket. Coming up next, the manager of your Detroit Tigers, A.J. Hinch. Stoney and Jansen, 97.1 The Ticket.
Hey, I want to tell you about auto accident injury attorney David Femininio. David has been helping victims of auto, truck, and motorcycle accidents in Michigan for over 25 years. And the best thing about David, it's that when you call David, you actually talk to David, and he's going to take the time to speak with you about your accident, your injuries and how he can best help you through such a difficult time. David handles all the legal technicalities so you can rest and recover. You can call David right now at 855-65-CRASH or go to his website, getdavidgetpaid.com. That's 855-65-CRASH, getdavidgetpaid.com. Hey, you want to get away, relax, and just simply have a good time? Get to the D Las Vegas for everything you need. The D is taking all the necessary precautions to make sure your stay is safe and you can enjoy all the comforts of a high-end Las Vegas hotel without missing out on any of the high-gaming energy and nightlife that you want. And if you want a great steak, Stoney and I are going to make sure we hit up Andiamo Steakhouse when we're there early September. The D Grill, American Coney Island. Heck, it's National Chili Dog Day. Stop by American Coney Island if you want something a bit more casual. At the D Las Vegas, the staff can set you up with a round of golf, and you can party all night at the Long Bar. So get a group together, get to the D Las Vegas, book a room at thed.com. That's thed.com. Or if you're staying on the Strip, make sure you put the D Las Vegas in downtown Vegas on your agenda. The D Las Vegas, your home for Detroit sports in Vegas.
248-539-9797. We got some ticket texts. We were talking about the Lions, looking forward to the future and all that stuff. Laporta, according to a texter, Laporta is Hawk 2.0, no blocking.
Huh?
Well, here's what Ben Johnson had to say yesterday, thanks to Lions.com, about his blocking. So he disagrees with the ticket texter.
Yeah, and I mean the coaches obviously are the ones that have watched the most film, and we'll get a chance to see if that's true or not when they line up against the Giants. We will see Laporta. Hopefully he stays healthy, and we get a chance to see him in all 3 preseason games, or at least in the first 2.
248-539-9797. Now, somebody is questioning the top 100 list, saying that the voting is about last year's team, last year's players, last year's season. And the ticket texter, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but they are correct. I should have mentioned that at 95 was Jamal Williams of the Saints.
Okay.
So
yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's.
I think it's more a projection, isn't it? That's what I always thought it was.
It just says the votes are in, and it's time to reveal the players' choices for the numbers. Well, right now, 80 to 71, 70 to 61 will be revealed later today.
Right.
So it doesn't say if there is, if it's a projection for this year, if it's upon what they anticipated last year. But yeah. That's I would anticipate it's probably a little bit of both. What'd you do last year?
Right.
And because there's going to be guys on this list that missed a lot of last year due to injury. I'm sure Aaron Donald will be in the top 10.
Yes. Exactly. Because we were talking about Houston. Houston should end up atop this list next year. Barring injury, people should get ready for a phenomenal season from this man. Now, it's the guy I mentioned. I kind of got scoffed upon, who I think is going to have a really good year that people are forgetting completely. And I remember we had him on the air last year, live from Allen Park, which will be Monday. We'll be there all Monday. And then he got hurt and didn't play.
Tracy Walker?
No, Charles Harris.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what he does this year and how they use him or how much they use him.
Right.
Are they going to be looking more to use James Houston than Charles Harris? Are they going to be looking to use, any number of guys, maybe a little bit ahead of him, simply because of, where he is in his career, and what you've seen on film is kind of what he is at this point. How much are they going to use Romeo Okwara?
Right. Or Julian Okwara.
Above Charles Harris.
Yeah. And where's Josh Pascal? Is he going to be more inside, I assume? Who knows? They say he's playing well right now, or at least he's playing is Uzurike.
Yeah.
And if he can stay healthy and do the right things, they can count on him as well. Lions missed playoffs again last year, and too much projection going on. Read this team. Also, these lists are stupid. Who cares if they have guys on the list? That's from Kevin from Wixom.
Well, you've got to have guys that are performing well, that especially other players would rank in the top 100 to have a successful. You got to have the Jimmies and Joes.
Yes, absolutely. Congratulations. He's not a Jimmy or a Joe, but he's a Fred. Fred in Westland. He heard Heather say, get ready for, here comes Snoopy and Heather. So he's getting a pair of tickets to see the Tigers take on the Tampa Bay Rays on August the 4th at Comerica Park. For more information, go to tigers.com or call 866-66-TIGER. All right, it is time for the Two Grand Slam, which is brought to you each and every week by Genesis Credit Union. Gator is here. Gator, I don't want to put too much pressure on you, but our contestant today got 9.
Wow.
We thought, and he went
So
back,
close.
and he missed the last one that we thought he was going to get.
Yeah, I don't feel good about that, but okay.
I think you can get this.
Yep. It's gettable.
I'm looking right
gettable.
now. Yeah, there's the one
Yeah.
that might be tough that he got quickly, but we'll see. All right, here we go. The clock begins now. Amon-Ra St. Brown played at this college.
USC.
Who is the director of the movie Oppenheimer?
Nolan.
Our producer Greg Hargrave graduated from this college.
Michigan.
Who is the current starting quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks?
Smith.
Tom Cruise was married to this actress in between Mimi Rogers and Katie Holmes.
Pass.
What NBA team originally drafted Charles Barkley?
Philadelphia.
This team had the worst record in the NBA last season.
The Pistons.
Wisconsin football plays this House of Pain song at the beginning of the fourth quarter.
Jump around.
A.J. Hinch won a World Series managing this team.
Houston.
What is 96 divided by 3?
32.
Tom Cruise was married to this actress in between Mimi Rogers and Katie Holmes.
I didn't know he was. It's killing me.
Oh, you got 9 as well.
I knew Mimi Rogers and I knew Katie Holmes. He was married between.
Nicole Kidman.
Oh, damn it. Come on, Scott. Oh, come on, man. Eyes wide shut the whole bit. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
The
I
caller,
actually had the kids.
Would NBA the team with the worst record in the NBA?
he said Pistons.
Pistons.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was.
The contestant this morning did not know where Greg
32?
Hargrave went to college.
Yeah.
I can't believe I forgot Nicole Kidman. That's going to bother me. Not as much
That's
as
what we're
not
here
coming
for.
up with Kevin Costner the one time with Yellowstone. That's just a total brain fart.
Yes.
This one wasn't a brain fart. Like that one I knew. I'm like, I know. Oh, I can't say the name. This one is just like a total lapse. And you know this, right? I guess I do. Yes, of course I know this.
Mhm. What do you guys got going today?
Well, I'm going to lament that for a while. But no, there's lots to talk about. Look, we got Shohei Ohtani is in town to pitch now.
Mhm.
The Angels have decided they're not going to trade him. Very, very questionable in my mind, but it may tell me one thing. There's only one reason that you don't trade him. We've got so much stuff to talk about. I heard you guys talking earlier about the PJ Fleck stuff, and I have no issue with any of it with so far. I mean, of course, if he was turning a blind eye to
Hazing.
well, I don't even know. Are there hazing allegations?
No,
Turning a
there's no
blind
hazing
eye
not at all.
allegations.
No,
if he was turning a blind eye to players that tested positive,
right.
that's a problem. But other than that, I have nothing. I have no issue. Like I know that you took issue with the like the standing ovations or the applauding when he comes to a room. What if I put it in this context? What if the purpose of that wasn't to inflate his own ego, though maybe that may be a byproduct of it, but if the purpose of it is, hey, coach just entered the room, let's get excited about football. That's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, John, does that make sense?
Yeah, and we had mentioned that. Hey, it's would you rather come into a room where all the players, front row to the back row, are kicked back, hats on backwards, hoodies up, they got a cup of coffee, and it looks like, hey, yeah, we're gonna watch TV, versus you come into a room, everybody stands up, everybody is clapping, cheering, whatever, and then they sit down and they look and they sound like they're ready to enter this meeting.
To me, it just sounds like, okay, let's flip the switch. We're getting ready for football now, guys. Okay, it's time to get serious. Let's have some fun here. Let's go. Get the energy up. At least that's the way I interpreted it. Now, again, the byproduct could absolutely be to inflate his ego,
Right.
and I think he's got an ego, but he's also got results. He's been a really good coach. He took over a program and that won one game. His first year at Western, they won one game, and by the time he left, they won 13.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty impressive in like a 5-year span or 4-year span. He's already got an 11-win season with Minnesota, back-to-back 9-win seasons with Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, if I mentioned it's Minnesota,
Right.
so I think he's a hell of a coach.
All right. Carson Anderson coming up next. Shortened show. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. And welcome to the Karsch and Anderson program. Scott the Gator Anderson with you today. Doug and Kang are out. Greg's behind the glass. Kenny's got the phones. Evan's lurking. Always good. Look forward to talking with you folks out there. 248-539-9797 is a telephone number. It's the same number to text if you want to communicate that way. That's fine, but we always enjoy the phone calls. You can have a little back and forth, a conversation, as we like to say. A lot going on, right? You had the U.S. women's national team last night in the World Cup. You've got the Tigers. We got a doubleheader today. Shohei Ohtani is going to pitch. Apparently, he's not going to be traded. He's been taken off the trade market. Interesting development there. The Angels actually made a trade last night to acquire some more pitching. So they're going for it. We've got perhaps some rumors with the Tigers, some teams that are interested in one of our players. A lot happening. The Ryan Day comments are interesting. A little precious in some ways, but it's also, hey, get past the fact that, get over yourself. But there's some merit to what he has to say, too, because that's really just the way how things have been lately in the Big Ten with how good Michigan and Ohio State have been. So I think that's kind of interesting. We'll get into a debate about that a little bit later on in the show as well. And then there was the big news that Aaron Rodgers took a monster pay cut so that the Jets can do some things, which is interesting because I'm sure folks in Green Bay are like, you did what? I'm sorry, what was that? Did you just take a $35 million pay cut? You redid your contract so you can get players. You didn't want to do that here in Green Bay? Oh, okay. Great. So Aaron Rodgers may be, I don't know if I mean, of course, people in New York that are Jets fans will think it's awesome. Everyone else will think he's a jerk. The NFL Players Association, I'm curious what the players have to say about that because I don't think they like when players give back money. Now, of course, it could be softened by saying, well, he's giving it back so other guys can get more, so maybe they don't care as much. But by and large, I don't think they want players giving back as much money as he just did, which was $35 million. But thought we'd start with the Tigers, okay? And the game got rained out yesterday or last night, and we knew that was going to happen early. I think I just left the building, and it was announced right around 2 o'clock that the game had been postponed. Makes all the sense. We got all the rain. There was some serious storms that came through. I hope that people didn't have too much damage. If you did, like to hear about what happened with you. I know that the further south you were and maybe downriver you were, that you got a ton of wind, like high winds, like in the 60s. There was some wind gusts there. I didn't get that anywhere near where I was. Got some heavy rain for a little bit, but by and large, not terrible in my neighborhood, which the last couple storms have seen a bunch of downed trees and stuff, but this one wasn't bad for us, but for you, maybe it was. But with the Tigers, so now they have a straight doubleheader today, old-fashioned doubleheader, and game one was something that we weren't expecting. Shohei Ohtani wasn't supposed to pitch this series against the Tigers. Well, he's pitching, and he's pitching today in the first game, the 110 game he's going to pitch. And that's pretty cool. I know it looks overcast and cloudy out there today, but according to the weather services, it's not supposed to rain. It's going to be warmer. It's probably going to be very humid as well, mid-80s and with humidity, so be prepared for that. But I got to ask the people right off the bat, are you going to see this man pitch? This is perhaps the greatest player in my lifetime that I've seen. He's going to go down for what he's done for the last few years as some of the greatest seasons in Major League Baseball history because of his hitting ability and his pitching ability. We've talked about this a bunch. Don't need to continue to shine the light on what his accomplishments are. But I do want to ask people at 248-539-9797. I mean, this is an attraction. And he's coming to, obviously was here the other day for the first game of the series. And when any anytime the Angels come to town, Shohei's in town, but he doesn't always pitch. He's pitching today. Does that get you geared up, get the family together, or the kids or whatever it is, and get down to the game? Are you going to play some hooky this afternoon to go watch Shohei Ohtani pitch? Be curious about that because he is the attraction. The other part of the attraction is who he's pitching against. Michael Lorenzen. Lorenzen, who has lowered his earned run average down to 3.49. Lorenzen, who's a free agent at the end of the season. Lorenzen, who many people feel is on the trading block, as he should be on the trading block. Is Michael Lorenzen going to be making his final start as a Detroit Tiger? That is entirely possible as well. But we've got some Tiger questions about this today because we're just 5 games away from the trade deadline for the Tigers. They've got 2 against the Angels. They've got 3 against the Marlins. I believe they have Monday off, but Monday is the trade deadline day. So I think it's awfully important for some players to really step things up in these 5 games to show that they've got something that the Tigers need to keep looking at as opposed to looking elsewhere for. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Are you going to the game today? See Shohei Ohtani pitch? See Shohei Ohtani hit? Also, who do you think that these last 5 games is most important for on the Detroit Tigers roster? We'll talk about it with you next year on 97.1 The Ticket. Flying Ace Bourbon is something I've been talking about for a long time now, many months here, and I'm telling you, it is a delicious bourbon. It's not pretentious at all. There's no gimmicks. It's just great, approachable American whiskey for the maverick at heart. And listen, it's only $30 a bottle. It's not going to bust your budget, but it is versatile, man. You want to do some shots with your friends, celebrate a Tigers victory? Go ahead and do it. You just want to have a nice sipper at night? You can have it that way. You want to pour it over some ice or maybe add a little bit of water to it to mellow it out and change the flavor profile? Go ahead and do that. If you've never done that with spirits, that's what you do. You know, you can drink it neat, but if you add a little bit of water, it changes things, and give that a shot as well. Or you can just drink it with ginger ale or cola, whatever you want to do. Nobody's going to look at you funny, man. This is good stuff. It's a tribute to the American Airmen of World War I and Michigan's rich history of producing some of the finest aviators and airplanes in the world. Flying Ace Bourbon is a bourbon that pays homage to both. It's a small batch American bourbon blended in Holland, Michigan. Yep, it's part of that Coppercraft family. You know it's quality, artfully crafted for the brave of heart. Follow them at Flying Ace Spirits on Instagram to stay up to date on their upcoming releases. And as always, please drink responsibly. it's AJ Hinch talking this morning with the guys about the trade deadline and how teams are feeling the clubhouse about this day looming here and what it's like the days leading up to the trade deadline, depending where you're at in the standings. And here are the Tigers. They're kind of in limbo, right? I mean, they're 6.5 games back in the division. They have no shot of making the wild card, so the only chance that they're going to have is to make the playoffs is to win the division. It's not insurmountable. It's just unlikely. The Twins are putting together a real nice stretch here. They lost last night, but they did come back. That they lost. But it's just the third time in the last 14 games they've lost. I think they're 11-3 in their last 14. They put together a nice run, and they're capable of doing that. Are the Tigers capable of putting together a stretch like that? I don't think so, only because we haven't seen anything close to it. The hitting just hasn't been consistent. AJ Hinch had said earlier in that interview that the things that plague him is just having quality at bats, productive at bats. It's one of the things that can drive you nuts if you got a runner on second base and nobody out, and the guy who's up can't advance him to third. We saw that in the extra innings. We've seen it all season long. The guys just aren't getting players over. The player at third and nobody out. And we've seen where the Tigers haven't gotten the run in. I mean, you need somebody just to lift the fly ball to the outfield and bring that run home. Sacrifice yourself that way. And it's been frustrating. It's not the easiest thing in the world to hit a baseball, of course. And in fact, it's probably the toughest thing in all of sports to do. But the unproductive outs are ones that have plagued this team for a while. You can follow us for live streaming with video on twitch.tv. Search for 971 The Ticket. You could also see us on YouTube. And I see that some of the people on Twitch have definitely given their opinions about the different things today, which is cool. First, with the storms, know that some people have had some issues. Detroit says, I have a large broken branch just dangling over my garage waiting to fall down. Well, I hope there's no damage associated with that. I had a giant branch fall down in my backyard a couple of weeks ago. That was no good. I was at a friend's house on Saturday night, and they pointed out a branch in their backyard that was really precarious. It was a giant branch that had broken off completely, but was stuck up in the canopy of the other branches, and it needed to come down. And now they need to remove it looks like they need to remove the entire tree. So they were trying to contact a service to do that. And I think by this point it's probably been done, but nonetheless, it's not a good feeling as a homeowner when you look outside and you see branches that are dangling. That's not good. Not good at all. And also I noticed that when I was doing the quiz with Stoney, that people were chiming in. 32, Gator, 32. I got it right. 96 divided by 3. I got it right. I should get credit for that. But I lose the credit when I couldn't come up with Nicole Kidman being the wife of Tom Cruise between Mimi Rogers and Katie Holmes. That I apologize for. Sorry, Twitch. It disappointed me too. I didn't like to hear that. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Let's get back to the phones. Tim is next up here, 97 on The Ticket. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Gator. What's up, man? Long time, first time caller.
Excellent.
So we're transplants from Detroit, born and raised in Detroit. We live in Chicago. On Sunday, my wife comes up with this crazy idea, crazy for her. She wants to drive to Detroit to see Shohei play against the Tigers.
Okay.
So big for her. We get tickets for yesterday's game. She's driving out there. During the drive, the game gets postponed. She gets to her mom's house, and she's like, what do I do? How do I exchange these tickets? Can we go tomorrow? So I get online, and I see that, hey, Shohei's pitching on Thursday in the first game. So I was able to get her tickets for the first game. So not only is she going to be able to see him hit, but she's also going to be able to see him pitch.
Wow, that's cool. Had they
Yeah.
changed the prices of the tickets when you bought them online?
Yeah, we bought them from StubHub for like $330.
Oh.
Free tickets. She's got her two boys with her. And then we got cheaper seats from Tigers.com for the 1 o'clock game today, almost in the same section. So just a huge turn of fortune. Yesterday was a disaster. I blew it. I'm never doing this again. Something crazy like this, impulsive. But then it just turned out to be so great. And I'm just totally stoked for her. So she's getting ready to go to the game right now.
Yeah,
and if she's listening to them,
I hope so. What's her name?
Her name is Nicole.
Well, Nicole, have a great time at the game today. Tim, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. And that's definitely luck of the draw there, because he wasn't supposed to pitch in Detroit. He was supposed to pitch, I think, in Toronto tomorrow. They changed that up, and he's pitching today, the first game of the doubleheader against Michael Lorenzen. It's an interesting matchup when you look at it. You had Ohtani, who until yesterday was on the trade block. Now he's not. Apparently, reportedly, the Angels aren't going to be trading Shohei Ohtani. They're going for it. In fact, they traded for some pitching. Giolito from the White Sox, and also Reynaldo Lopez, the bullpen arm from the White Sox. They maybe trade to shore up that rotation and the bullpen. So they're going for it, which is interesting. And I was trying to figure this out. If I were an Angels fan, how would I feel about this? And I think I'd be really pissed. It's a bittersweet thing, because, of course, you got the best player in the league. You want to hang on to that, and you want to watch it as much as you can. But he's a free agent at the end of the season. There are going to be bidders with deep pockets, and you would expect that he leaves at the end of the season in free agency. If he does, and you haven't traded him, you lose him for almost nothing. The only thing you get is a compensatory draft pick in next year's draft. That's it. You blew the opportunity to cash in the golden ticket here and get a bunch of prospects, perhaps a couple of players that are already major league players, major league talent, upgrades over what you had, and you will have blown that opportunity. The only thing that makes sense out of this, to me, and it's not going for it to win the World Series, because I just don't think that they can do that. I don't think that they're good enough to do that. It's if Artie Moreno, the owner of the Angels, if he already knows that Shohei doesn't want to leave, that they've had discussions and through agents or whatever, or through Shohei himself, they said, you know what? He likes it here. He wants to stay here. We're close. Why don't we go for it this season, and we'll negotiate in good faith with the Angels this offseason to stay in Los Angeles or in Anaheim. If they don't have that kind of knowledge, if they don't have that sort of agreement going into this, then this makes no sense for the Angels. It makes no sense. And I try to put myself in their shoes as a fan. And we kind of went through that. We didn't more than kind of. We actually did go through that when they had the purge, and Verlander and J.D. Martinez and Upton and Price and all that within a year or two span that they sold off. The Tigers ended up selling off, and of course we're just left with Jake Rogers when all is said and done. And it's so disappointing, because they had all these great players they traded away because they weren't going to be part of the team's future. They weren't going to keep paying them and have this payroll that was spiraled above $200 million. They weren't going to keep that up, and they moved on. And, of course, Tiger's been in a rebuild ever since, and with very little to show for it. But at the time, they traded and they got a bunch of prospects, and none of them really panned out. You got some use out of Fulmer and Boyd, but otherwise not much. You got Jake Rogers, and Jake's got a bat that can hit some home runs, and he's a good defensive catcher. But is he an everyday catcher? I don't know. I think he's one of these guys that I talk about that I think these 5 games are important. Now, 5 games isn't going to make or break somebody's season for sure, but the Tigers have some bargaining chips, and if they're going to trade these chips off, it's interesting to see what they want in return. I mean, because you could say the top priority for this organization is a third baseman, or is it a catcher? Is it an outfielder? It's certainly a bat. For certain, it's a bat. But I'm looking at those positions, and I'm saying, okay, these are the priorities for the team to build it moving forward. So other guys have to step up, and I think Jake Rogers is one of those guys. Has to prove that he is, in fact, a piece for the future. I don't think he's on the trading block by any means. So he's probably got more than just these 5 games to continue to show himself. And I guess basically the rest of these guys do too, but I think it is important for some of these players to really show themselves in the next 5 days, to leave an impression prior to the Tigers making trades, to make them think twice about what they have to get in return. I'll tell you which players I'm talking about as we continue. 248-539-9797, the telephone number. You heading downtown, catch Shohei Ohtani. He's going to pitch today. He's pitching the first game against Michael Lorenzen. This is 97.1, The Ticket. It's AJ Hinch from this morning on with the morning show talking about the trade deadline. And look, it's got to loom large in the locker room. The Tigers know they've got some players that are going to be coveted by other teams. I mean, you got a starting pitcher today in Michael Lorenzen, who is, he's an all-star, albeit he was not a whole lot to choose from the Tigers. But since he made his all-star appearance, he's lowered his earned run average by a full run. He's down to 3.49, which is actually pretty good. You still have Eduardo Rodriguez, whose earned run average, despite having a couple of rocky starts lately, is still under 3.0. These are two guys that are valuable on the trade market. I'm not sure what the Tigers are going to ask for in return. If you try to prioritize what they need, I think you start with batting. You got to get some hitting here. Some consistently good, not just okay, but good. They need to find a way to get a player that's going to be added to the core of this team. Now, does Rodriguez or Lorenzen get that automatically? Probably not. You might have to sweeten that deal. They're both, well, at least with Lorenzen, he's a free agent at the end of the year, so it's a rental. But because he came with such a low price tag, I think he signed for $8.5 million for the season. So you're going to get him for less than $4 million that you'd have to pay for the rest of the year. I would imagine that a team feels pretty good about being able to sign him long term if you want. If you wanted to give him a 3-year extension, that it probably wouldn't cost you too much money. If this year was 8.5, would a 3-year, $30 million extension be out of line? Probably not. So does that make him more attractive to other teams? And with Rodriguez, well, he can opt out of his contract at the end of the season, which is the big unknown with Eduardo Rodriguez. And that's one of the issues with trying to trade him, is that teams don't know if it's going to be a rental or if this is a guy that's going to stick around. Now, he did speak a couple weeks ago and said basically that he's fine with the money that he's making, at least alluding to he wouldn't opt out of the contract. After this season, he's due to make $18 million, $16 million, and $15 million over the next 3 years. But he'll be on the wrong side of 30, and he's been a little erratic in his career. So maybe, and he's had some issues with injuries, so maybe he wouldn't opt out. But that's a tricky road to traverse there and navigate with what he's going to do. You don't really know. But he's got value. To be sure, he's got value. Like I mentioned, the earned run average this year is below 3. It's the best earned run average he's had in his career by almost a full run. Prior to that, his best ERA on a season was 2019 when he had made 34 starts with Boston and had a 3.81 earned run average. Last year in 17 starts with the Tigers, he was at 4.05, and now he's at 2.95 this year through 15 starts. And he's better than a strikeout per inning. His whip is excellent at 1.03. He's been very good this year. Unfortunately, he's been a couple bad starts recently, which may paint it worse than what it needs to be. But if you were to pair Eduardo Rodriguez, and apparently there's a lot of interest in Eduardo Rodriguez, if you were to pair him with someone else, like perhaps you were to move him to along with Jason Foley, does that sweeten the pot enough where you can get a player that's going to be part of your core? It might. Jason Foley would be a pitcher that's under your control. He's 27 years old. He throws high 90s. His ERA is just above 2. He's turned into an incredibly dependable bullpen arm for the Tigers. He's a strikeout guy. You have Alex Lang as well, though Lang's, I can't imagine his value is terribly high right now, given that he's going through a real rough patch over the last 6 weeks. He's been very inconsistent. But they do have bullpen arms that would certainly sweeten deals for other teams here. And I mentioned that, Giolito just got traded last night. Well, Giolito's ERA wasn't anything to write home about. Just looking at the stats for this year, it could be argued, and you'd win, that Rodriguez has been better. But different ages, different stages of their careers, and different track records would lead you to understand why the Angels made the move for Giolito. But it doesn't mean that the Tigers don't have players that other teams would covet. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. We got some text coming in, I should say. Going to the game for a work event and struck gold. Free doubleheader and Ohtani pitching. That's from Gabe in Southfield. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I mean, if you had tickets for today's game and you were just like, yeah, look, I want to go to a day game, just have some fun. Hey, Shohei's hitting. That's pretty cool. And then to find out, oh, wait, not only is he hitting, but he's pitching. That's great. Immediately after finding out that he was pitching, I bought a ticket to the game. I don't care if I have to go alone. I don't blame you. Look, there are certain players that I think are worth getting a ticket and going to see the game by yourself if that's what has to happen. I did that. I've done that in my life at least once. I made sure that I saw Nolan Ryan pitch at Tiger Stadium the last time Nolan Ryan came to town. I believe with the Texas Rangers at the time. And look, I was a huge Nolan Ryan fan. I wanted to make sure I saw him pitch. He didn't do terribly well that day, but to be able to see this phenomenon, the guy threw 7 no-hitters and, 5,000 something strikeouts. He was unbelievable. And I got to see him live at least once. That was totally worth it. Ohtani's in his prime right now, and you have a chance to go see him. I think he's one of those guys that absolutely is worth the price of admission. As soon as I got the notification on my phone that Shohei was pitching, I looked into tickets. Prices shot through the roof. I'm not spending $200 plus for one ticket, Upper Bowl, Section 327 behind the plate. That's Matt. Now, Greg, you said you were looking online at StubHub and you saw tickets for $20?
Yeah, I was just looking during the break, and I saw them for as low as about $22.
So you can get into the game and buy, a poor seat, but it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. And I don't suspect there's going to be 40,000 people at the ballpark today. That's not going to happen. You'll be able to migrate to a decent seat. What they have, 24,000 for the first game of the series, I think. I would imagine that probably about the same crowd they get today. But today should probably be a really good walk-up crowd at Comerica Park because Shohei Ohtani is pitching. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. I mentioned that I think there's a handful of players that these 5 games left before the trade deadline is pretty important to. I think they're going to have to make a really good impression on the team prior to the deadline. Of course, they have the rest of the season to do it as well. But this is when they can make trades. And when you prioritize what they need to bring back in trades, whether it's an outfielder, a third baseman, a catcher, I think it's important to those guys. So, for instance, I think this game is really important for Eric Haas, or I should say these 5 days are important for Eric Haas. He hasn't hit all season long. He needs to start to hit. He's got to catch fire at some point, or his time with the Tigers is likely done. And if it's done with the Tigers, then maybe it could be done shortly in the major leagues. I root for the guy. How can you not root for the guy? Local guy, right? And it was just a couple years ago that he pumped over 20 home runs. It was great. He's not that same player. And he's just not hitting this year. And that's the biggest issue. Jake Rogers, I think it's important for him. The rest of the way here. I don't expect him to be on the trading block, but if the Tigers are looking to improve the trading position, then he has to do more than he has. The bat has picked up significantly lately, the last month or so. He's really raised the average up. It's still not respectable, but I think I want to say he's at the 220 range right now, which is at least it's getting better. He's at 222 right now, but his OPS is 760, which is well above league average. That's because he's got 12 home runs and 189 at bats, and he doesn't miss when he hits that home run. It's gone. It's not like these are gimmies that just barely get over the fence. He pounds the ball over the fence, which is good to see. But I still think that this time is important for him. I think it's important for Andy Ibanez. He's extremely versatile, which is great. Now, is he effectively the Willie Castro or the Harold Castro, name your Castro of this Tigers team? Maybe. He's kind of been that way throughout his career when he was with Texas before, and now he's getting a chance with the Tigers. He's got over 200 at-bats on the season, but we need to see a little bit more. I mean, he's hitting 236, nothing to write home about, but for the Tigers team, that's probably fourth or fifth best on the team. But he was hitting a bunch of line drives early and not so much lately. So I think he has to step it up a little bit. And another Tiger, I think it's awfully important to for not only just the 5 games, but the rest of the season. I think it's important for Akil Baddoo. The outfielder who's missed some time with injury, he's come back to the team, and he's likely to have somewhere around 300 at-bats this year. And he's hitting 210 on the season with a 631 OPS. You know Akil Baddoo has talent. He can steal some bases. He's improved every year in the outfield. Doesn't have an arm, but at least he can field, which is a big step in the right direction. But if he's going to stick around, he has to hit, because there are a bunch of Tiger outfield prospects that are just knocking on the door, if not knocking this door down the next few weeks, that are going to get their opportunities soon as well. I have no doubt in my mind that the Tigers will give some opportunities to players at Toledo that play outfield, because they've got to find some guys that can hit and see if they can hit. Look, the fielding part, they can work on it. Like I mentioned with Baddoo, he's become a better fielder. They can work on that with some of these guys, but some of these guys already are more advanced in hitting than Baddoo is. Now, that's minor league stuff. Can you do it at the major league level? That's the big jump. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Which player do you think is most important the rest of the season? But I'm looking just really in this small little 5-game stint here before the trade deadline. Who's got to let everybody know that I belong in this team, I belong in the major leagues, and I can belong in the core of this team? Who is that for you? 248-539-9797. Same number to text us as well. Hey, we're tired of maintaining your tired old deck? Well, rise above maintenance with Trex composite decking from Builder's First Source. Trex decking is fade, stain, scratch, and mold resistant. Like if you have a red wine spill or a scorching sun, don't worry about it. Trex decking maintains its premium ageless look no matter what you throw at it, with decking to fit any budget. Find Trex composite decking at Builder's First Source in Clinton and Shelby Townships and online at bldrmichigan.com. Builder's First Source, Macomb County's largest and first source for decking. I just saw a video clip of a Houston Texans practice, and pretty cool stuff. It's a video that shows C.J. Stroud, the rookie quarterback, throwing passes to John Mechie, the wide receiver. Mechie has been fully cleared to practice after winning his battle against leukemia. So that's really cool. This is from Dov Kleiman. Sometimes you forget about players if they've been, gone for a season because of injuries and that they're even around. But John Mechie was so freaking fast in college in Alabama. You forget about guys, and now he's back with the team. And you look at their receiving core with Robert Woods, Nico Collins, and John Mechie. Might not be a bad group of receivers that they have there for Stroud to work with. Dalton Schultz, tight end from the Cowboys, he's there with them as well. They could have something going on there to at least, not that they're going to be a playoff team the first year, but I think that you're going to see the Houston Texans being a team that could be something to be reckoned with in a couple of years if C.J. Stroud pans out. I think he will. I know people hate the Ohio State thing, and they think that the Ohio State quarterbacks are going to be bad. But I think there's a difference with what Stroud showed last year. And even against Michigan, C.J. Stroud wasn't the reason they lost to Michigan. C.J. Stroud played pretty well in the two losses to Michigan. He played well. Wasn't until late in the game last year that I think he tried to force a couple things when they were down, and things got a little out of hand there. But I was a big C.J. Stroud fan, and I think he's going to be successful with Houston. I don't believe the Lions are practicing today. Coach gave them the day off, which is good. They've worked hard for the first few days of practice. You want to make sure they're not terribly sore, but they'll get back at it. And we're going to have, of course, preseason football and regular season football right here in your home for Lions football. 97.1 The Ticket. Speaking of a different kind of football, and that would be the football version, which is the World Cup. I don't know how many people watched last night's game, United States and Netherlands in a Women's World Cup. I feel that this is the one sport I shouldn't say the one sport. I think it's the sport that men watch more than any other women's sport is the soccer. And because they've been so successful, because they've won World Cups, and this isn't just a recent phenomenon. I mean, when you think back to 25 years ago, or wherever it was, when Brandi Chastain scored that goal in the penalty kick and then ripped the shirt off and the sports bra, the whole thing, that Mia Hamm team, we knew those names and still know those names today. And now it's a different group of players that are matriculating through, and it's kind of cool to watch, and it's good soccer, man. It's the passing is crisp. They know what they're doing. And they're at top of their game. And there was a really cool ad that my niece had showed me. I forget who it was. I don't know if it was just promoting the World Cup or if it was for a product. But it showed a video of the French men's team, which won the most recent World Cup for the men, and a highlight package of these, some tremendous plays and goals and just plays throughout the game. And then halfway through the commercial, it stops and the video freezes. And then the second half of the video shows what they actually did, which what they did was use CGI to they were actually the women's plays, and they used CGI to make it look like it was the men. But actually all these great highlights that you saw were from the women's teams, which was really awesome to see. Because I think there is that prejudice that goes in. Of course, all the men, yeah, they're going to make plays like this. But no, it wasn't the men. It was the women. And it was something that I wanted to tune into last night. I forgot about it. Then I'm like, oh, it's on. And I flipped it on when it was only 13 minutes into the game, and I saw the United States is already down 1-0. So this is an interesting situation because the women normally aren't trailing in games. And then get into the second half, and then I realized, the game not only is it on TV, but it's on ultra high def. If you have that, that's good. So I flipped it on in that version, and picture became even clearer, and it was great. And there was a play that was late in that game Maybe it wasn't terribly late. It was in the second half, I think. Maybe halfway through or 2/3 of the way through, where the player for the United States, Lindsey Horan, got knocked down. It was a collision, looked like an elbow was thrown maybe, and it was really kind of a rough play. And she stayed down for a while, and there was a lot of talking going back and forth between some American players and the Netherlands player and the one who had done that. And I guess they were teammates. They played together in Europe with Lyon. And I'm learning all this for the first time because I don't really watch too much of the soccer. So forgive me if I'm rehashing stuff like, yeah, no kidding, Gator. But it got to the point where the official brings the two players together and basically wants the players to apologize to each other, which I thought was kind of strange, but okay. You can get them to do that, shake hands and move on, whatever. But it was clear that Lindsey Horan was pissed. And I think there was a yellow card that was issued. There was, a kick that was a penalty kick involved, but it wasn't your straight on, one-on-one against the goalie. It was just another penalty kick throughout the box. And they set up they set it up for a perfect header that Lindsey Horan ended up heading it into the net. Like immediately, this is the first play that happens after the play was stopped. And it was an amazing moment last night. Everyone's cheering and celebrating and everything. And it was just incredible. That was the goal they needed. They desperately needed to get that goal. But to have it happen right away by the woman that was knocked down was pretty sweet and pretty satisfying. I don't know if you took time out to watch the game last night. Are you following the Women's World Cup at all? That was the first game. I didn't watch the first game against Vietnam. So this was the second game they played. I made sure I watched it. It paid off handsomely. It was a great highlight. It was a great moment. And they end up drawing in the game 1-1. There was no overtime period or extended play period in this round. So it was just cool, all in all. And I'm looking forward to the next game. I'm going to actually look up and see when they're going to play the next game. But are you paying attention to this? Does this get your attention? Did you watch it last night? Did you take time out to watch it last night? And what was your thought on that whole incident with Lindsey Horan and then the eventual goal, the game tying goal? I thought it was amazing. Just the whole timing of it. I mean, the goal, look, that's going to happen. It was a really nice goal, don't get me wrong. But just the events leading up to it was really, really cool. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Your thoughts on the Women's World Cup, if you're paying attention to that. Are you going to head down to the ballpark today? Shohei Ohtani is pitching for the Angels in the first game of the doubleheader. The Tigers counter with Michael Lorenzen. Interesting because Lorenzen could be this could be his last start ever as a Tiger. And there's that on the table. We're going to get into some stuff that Ryan Day had to say at the Big Ten Media Day yesterday that may bother some Michigan fans about what he had to say. But in the end, I think you can understand why he's saying it. We'll get to that coming up at 11:15 here on 97.1 The Ticket.
Tigers fans will get a first-hand look at Shohei Ohtani pitching and hitting in the same game today. He's starting the first game of the straight doubleheader scheduled at Comerica Park. A.J. Hinch says that they'll be originally prepared for him before the series and will be ready to face him as well. Also that Javi Baez will be moved down in the order today. As for the trade deadline, Hinch talked about whether or not it's a big distraction in the clubhouse that's expected to do a little bit of selling. Yeah, he was on 97.1 this morning. One of the possible trade pieces, Michael Lorenzen will pitch Game 1. Matt Manning slated to go in Game 2. Things got going, or will get going, at 1:10 p.m. on 97.1 right here with Dan Dickerson on the call. For those going, you cannot use last night's tickets for admission. They do have to be exchanged. A day off for Lions players at training camp. The good news is that they can put the pads on tomorrow when they return to the field. We are now 6 weeks away exactly from Lions versus Chiefs opening the NFL season. Also, Jim Harbaugh will address the media today for the first time since his reported 4-game suspension. He, Mike Sainristil, Blake Corum, and Chris Jenkins are scheduled to speak during Big Ten Media Day today in Indy. At the Ticket Update desk, brought to you by Twin Peaks, 23 and 53 past the hour. That's when I do the other one. Top of the hour here on 97.1. Chris Villar, 97.1 The Ticket.
And welcome back to the Karsch and Anderson Show here on 97.1 The Ticket. Doug Karsch and Kang are out this week. They'll be back next week. So it's just me, Gator, with you today. Greg's behind the glass and Kenny working the phones. Evan's around as well. We love to talk to you. 248-539-9797. Same number to text us if you'd like to do it that way. That works too. I've been talking about Shohei Ohtani getting the start today for the Angels. This is a nice little bonus for Tiger fans around town because he wasn't supposed to pitch in this series. This is the best player in baseball and would have been nice to see him pitch. And initially was going to be pushed off until, I believe, tomorrow against Toronto. But nope, they've moved him back up. He is pitching in today's game. I think it's interesting that they're going to have him go against the Tigers. It's not like the Tigers is some juggernaut of a team hitting. You'd think you'd want him against a better hitting team like Toronto. But that's not the case. But maybe this happens because of the rain out last night. I don't know. I suspect it's more to do with the reports that Shohei Ohtani is now off the trade market. That the Angels will not be entertaining calls from other teams to acquire the great one. And I'm not sure why that is. I mean, they went out and made a trade last night to acquire a couple of pitchers from the White Sox organization. They went out and got Lucas Giolito, the starting pitcher. They also went out and got a relief pitcher, Reynaldo Lopez. I just think it's interesting because if you're the Angels, you're 4 games out of a wild card spot right now. One of those teams that is currently claiming the wild card actually is in your division. That's the Houston Astros. They got beat up last night by Texas, who is the division leader. So you're chasing that wild card spot, and you're not terribly far out at only 4 games. Making the acquisition that you did last night, adding another strong arm in the rotation, you feel better about it, and you're making a push. But what are you making a push for, really? Is this a team that looks like they're going to compete for the World Series? Not likely. In my opinion, I would say that. I don't think it's likely that the Angels are going for the World Series. So if that's the case, and you've got this golden ticket in Shohei Ohtani that you can trade to any team in baseball, basically. Not any team. I think there's no trade clause. But he's open to, I think, 18 teams in baseball or 20 teams in baseball, something like that. If you're the Angels, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, you need to set your team up for the future. You could get 3-4 top prospects from some organization, a couple of top prospects and a couple of already made it major league players, you could really set the tone for whatever you want. Because, of course, Shohei Ohtani is really kind of two players in one. Starting pitcher, as he's pitching today, and, of course, he's an everyday player. He could be a DH. You could play him in the outfield. He's capable of both, obviously. The only thing, and as I've been going through this, I can't believe the Angels aren't going to trade him, because I would have had a full-on fire sale. I would have taken offers for Mike Trout. I would have taken offers for anybody. You got to restart things, because the way things have gone, when you spend all this money on Mike Trout, and then you potentially could have spent money on Shohei Ohtani, it's too much to be invested in two players for this long and to not win in the playoffs, not even get to the playoffs. So restart things, get a bunch of top prospects, and see where you go. That's a tough sell to your fan base for sure. So the only reason that this would make any sense to me is if the Angels know that Shohei Ohtani is open to coming back to the Angels, that they've had discussions, despite reports saying otherwise, and that Shohei likes it in Los Angeles or Anaheim, I guess, and wants to stay with the Angels. He likes this team, he likes where they're going, and he wants to stay. Because if he doesn't, if you've had these discussions with him and you've started to say, hey, let's talk about a long-term deal, and you're so far away that you know that you can't get there, you'd have to trade him. But they're not trading him. It's really interesting to me. And, maybe part of it is he wants to pitch even more than what he is. Don't treat me with kid gloves. I can do this. I don't know. It's an interesting situation, and it's one that Tiger fans have been through before. We've had great players come through here. Unfortunately, that toward the ends of that contract, knew that they had to move on from him. Justin Verlander is the prime example, and he wasn't the only one that year. J.D. Martinez and Justin Upton. You had Price was another one. I mean, this is really kind of like the Max Scherzer situation. Is really what it's kind of like. When they offered Max the contract before the season, he turned them down. He said he's going to bet on himself. And the Tigers were too good that season to trade Max Scherzer because they were competing for a championship, that they didn't trade him. And they lost him for nothing at the end of the season because he obviously signed a free agent contract with Philadelphia at the time, or Washington, I guess, at the time. And the Tigers got nothing for it. They got a compensatory pick in the draft, and that was it. You don't want to be in that position again. And the Angels are not what the Tigers were in the 2013 or 2012, whatever season that was. The Angels aren't as good as the Tigers were back then. So I just find it's interesting to me. But he's clearly the biggest attraction in baseball. When it was announced that the pitching change had happened, that Ohtani is going to pitch in the first game of the doubleheader, well, ticket prices went through the roof on the secondary market for this game. There were people saying that the tickets are up to $300 a ticket for the game today. $200, $300 a ticket, depending on how good the tickets are. You can get in, last we checked, for $22. Terrible seats, but $22 to get into the ballpark. It's not going to be a sellout. I can't imagine it's a sellout at Comerica Park today, but yet this guy's the attraction. People are going to want to see him, and it's pretty cool. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Same number to text. Are you going to the game? Is this the guy that gets you to go to any game because it's Shohei Ohtani? He is the attraction. I got to see him when he's pitching. Makes it even better. Did you watch the World Cup game last night? Where do you stand there with women's soccer? Are you watching it? I watched it last night. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thought the goal was fantastic. The circumstances leading up to that goal, the instant gratification. It was incredible. Perfect moment last night. Well, maybe not the perfect moment because they didn't win the game, but they did draw in the games. They didn't lose. And they'll continue to advance in the World Cup. Also, trade deadline is Monday in Major League Baseball. Tigers have a number of players that are garnering a lot of interest. Eduardo Rodriguez, certainly. Michael Lorenzen also. And a couple of bullpen arms. Make me a little uncomfortable to talk about trading when it comes to Jason Foley for sure. Alex Lang, I'm a little more comfortable with, but these are the top four names that keep coming up with the Tigers in terms of teams asking about in trade. Kerry Carpenter's name comes up. I'm uncomfortable with that. I think he's part of the core. What do you think? 248-539-9797. 9797 is the telephone number. Talking Tiger baseball. We'll talk women's World Cup soccer. Shohei Ohtani coming to Comerica Park today to pitch. He's been with the Angels. They've been here for the last couple of days, but he's actually pitching in the game. Are you heading downtown? We'll talk about it next year on 97.1 The Ticket. We can get into some of that PJ Fleck stuff a little bit later on in the show. I heard Stoney and Chanson talking about it this morning. I saw the story break last night, and Apparently, PJ Fleck has responded, and I think he's supposed to speak at 11:30 at the Big Ten football meeting, so that could be interesting as well. The media day, but we'll get into that a little bit later. I did mention we want to get into the Ryan Day comments about the Ohio State-Michigan game. He talked yesterday at media day. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. Want to get to some ticket text first. At what point do the Tigers stop getting rid of these promising young players every year? It's almost as if the Tigers are a farm system for the rest of the major leagues. Well, I don't know how many times the Tigers have been burned by that. I mean, certainly when they made the trade last year to acquire Austin Meadows, giving up Isaac Paredes, he paid off dividends for Tampa right away. I don't think he's as good as what he was last year. Maybe it was just a fluke, but that certainly would be considered one. Eugenio Suarez, Tigers moved on from him years ago, and he provided a lot of home run power with Cincinnati, and now he's moved on to other teams. He's not as good as he was, but yeah, those are a couple guys. But other than that, what have they really given up on young players? I didn't like they gave up on Castellanos, and I'm not sure why they did to this day. I feel like that was some sort of disconnect that Nick Castellanos had with Al Avila, perhaps, or that Nick had a disconnect with the Tigers coaching staff at the time. I don't know. It just seemed weird that they moved on from Castellanos because at the time he was the only guy that could hit for the team, and he wasn't going to break the bank in free agency, and he didn't. And yet still continues to be a really good, consistent hitter in baseball. So I guess that would be one. But if we got bullpen arms, it seems like you can always develop some. But I like them when you got them. I don't want to give up on Foley. But that's a guy who would have value. And if you see somebody from another organization that you really covet, you've got to give something to get something. And if that's a sweetener it takes, then that's a sweetener it takes. I'd rather not go that route. And if they can find it simply by giving up a Lorenzen or giving up Rodriguez, great. My son plays T-ball in the Detroit PAL program. We got free tickets to today's game. Rain out got us Ohtani. Bonus. That's pretty sweet. 100% agree, Gator. Foley could get us potentially a core player. I wish Lang could do that for us, but if a batter has a little bit of discipline, they shouldn't be swinging at his curveball, and then Lang would be a walk machine. That's from Brett. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, Alex Lang relies solely, it seems, on that breaking ball and gets guys to swing and miss all the time. He throws it out of the strike zone or just below the strike zone. But, I mean, that's the easy button to press to think that that's how it works. Everybody makes adjustments. Then, next thing he'll do is he'll start dropping it in for strikes. And then he gets you thinking he's going to throw the strikes, and he keeps throwing it, and it gets it lower and lower in the zone, and he starts swinging and missing again. But he's already kind of been a walk machine. He needs to make the adjustment. Someone says package him with Baez, get rid of him. I'm not sure who you're packaging Baez with. And I don't think you can package Baez with anybody. The contract is awful, and it's awful because he hasn't produced at all. I mean, they got him for less than all the other shortstops, it seemed, at that time, which looked like, hey, this could be a really good deal. But it has not been. The year and a half that Javi Baez has been a Tiger, it's been just a disaster because he has not come close to hitting the way that he had been capable of, and the way that he is capable of, and the way that he had shown in years prior. It's very disappointing. Javi does play some pretty good defense, though, and I don't want to take that away from him. But, I mean, at some point, they need someone else to emerge in the system to be a dependable shortstop that can hit so that you can start to wean yourself off of that contract from Javi Baez. And then at some point, you're going to have to make a decision. Steve from Madison Heights, Gator. I was at the last game that Nolan Ryan pitched at Tiger Stadium. Although he only went 5 innings, he did pretty good. He got one call that was way outside, and it was called a third strike. Kind of didn't like that, but hey, he's Nolan Ryan. Yeah. I mean, you're going to get some calls. Last season when you're going on that final road, everybody sees that you're on your way out. Sometimes you get some calls. That was cool for him in that case. 248-539-9227. 9797 is the telephone number. Same number to text as well if you'd like to send us a text. Mentioned the comments that came yesterday from Ryan Day from Ohio State. And he said something that has already been kind of talked about. I know we talked about this a couple months ago because I believe Ward Manuel mentioned it as well from Michigan. And here's the quote from Ryan Day. He says, "I'm glad we still have the rivalry game with Michigan. I do think we should consider when we play it, just because you may end up playing them back-to-back weeks, which would be awkward. I know we need to consider the tradition, but I think it's worth a conversation on when, because I think that's significant just on how the season plays out." He went on to say, if both teams are in the Big Ten championship already, could it minimize the game? That's my concern. Even if you played it in week 11, week 10, no matter what, it's going to matter. But if you know that you're playing them in the Big Ten championship game already, it could be something that we haven't experienced before. That's all. Again, I think it's worth the discussion. So I guess, the first thought is, all right, get over yourself for assuming that that's going to be taking place. But then looking at it realistically, Michigan and Ohio State are the best teams in the Big Ten, and they always have been, save for a couple of years here and there. But, I mean, right now, both of these programs are humming along. These are two programs that get into the college football playoff and have recently. So I get it. And I think it's tricky for Michigan fans. Now, I can't speak on behalf of a Michigan fan because obviously I'm not a Michigan fan. But I know that they value tradition. And I know that they love to have this game at the end of the season. But the reason that it was tradition and the reason it was at the end of the season was because it meant the team that won that game won the Big Ten and represented the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl. Times have changed. We've gone on to the BCS, and now we've got the college football playoff, and now we have a Big Ten championship game. So all these things have changed since the tradition was built in. The tradition was built in because you won the Big Ten and you went to the Rose Bowl. Now that it's changed, have your thoughts changed on this? Are you open to changing the date of the game with Michigan, Ohio State? As much as it hurts to admit, being a Spartan fan, I mean, I should say Ryan Day is right. It will happen. It seems like, in all likelihood, if things don't change, if they keep the formats the way they are, that you could have a game at the end of the season where the cream of the crop in the Big Ten are Michigan and Ohio State. And because they're going to go away from divisions after this season, there you go. You could very well have those teams playing the game at the end of the year, knowing that they're still matched up in the Big Ten championship game. So you'd be playing back-to-back. And then, of course, you can get the nauseating thought that they could also meet up in the college football playoff, which why wouldn't you think that? Because they're going to expand the college football playoff. So does that give enough fuel to the fire for those that are saying, got to change the date of Michigan, Ohio State moving forward? Obviously, it's not going to affect it this year. This year, we still have the East and West division. But when USC and UCLA come to the Big Ten, perhaps down the road when you add even more teams to the Big Ten, does it make more sense to change that up? Because the tradition was tied to something that isn't around anymore. It was tied to the Big Ten championship and who gets to go to the Rose Bowl. And that's not around anymore. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Same number to text. I'm curious to hear from the Michigan fans. I'm an innocent bystander in this. To me, I think it should be moved, but I'm not going to fight anybody that says it shouldn't be. I'll listen to logic. I'll listen to reason. And I'm curious what you folks have to say. Does Ryan Day make sense in talking about this? Ward Manuel had said that this is something that they have to have discussions on. They've had discussions on that. He has talked with the Ohio State athletic director about perhaps moving that date. Does that make sense to you? 248-539-9797. This is 97.1, The Ticket. Welcome back to 97.1 The Ticket. Scott the Gator Anderson with you here in the Carson Anderson program. Taking your calls and texts at 248-539-9797. Just talking about the comments that Ryan Day made yesterday at Big Ten Media Day, talking about the possibility that he said, look, we need to at least just have a discussion about it. That they need to think about moving the date of the Michigan-Ohio State game moving forward, because with the addition of USC and UCLA coming to the Big Ten, perhaps other teams coming to the Big Ten, they're doing away with the divisions. That's the initial thought. Divisions are going to go away. So if you're not going to have divisions, then you no longer have a champ of the East and the West that match up for the Big Ten championship game. Instead, what you have is the top two teams in the conference, based on record, will get to the Big Ten championship game. And does that set up a possibility? Is there a scenario that you can believe is a realistic scenario that Michigan and Ohio State, if they keep things the way that they are, play at the end of the season for a game that doesn't matter? Because if it's already determined those are the best two teams in the Big Ten, that they're going to play in a Big Ten championship game the following week, then it renders that game kind of useless. Now, some of that has me saying, all right, rolling my eyes and saying, get over yourselves about that. But I have to admit, it's a very real possibility. I think that possibility changes when you're bringing in USC to the conference. I think it might change even more if you're able to bring in Oregon into the mix. Penn State's going nowhere. There are plenty of teams that are going to be barking about this and saying, all right, slow down. Remember us. But if you say that, you still have to acknowledge Michigan and Ohio State are two awesome football programs. And it could very well play out the way that Ryan Day has talked about. Michigan's talked about this before. We brought this up earlier in the year as a possibility. Once you find out this was going divisionless, that you have to consider this. I'm just curious how Michigan fans feel about this. 248-539-9797. We can go to the phones and talk to the people. Doug is first up here in 97.1 The Ticket. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Love your show.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a big Michigan fan, and I wouldn't have a problem with it, citing all the things that you've said, which is it makes sense that, yeah, you would have to change it, I would think. I still wouldn't want to play at the beginning of the season. I would like it in November, maybe, towards the end of the season. But it's still a big game, Scott,
It is. No, look, as a Spartan fan, I don't like Michigan, but I can acknowledge that that's a massive game and typically has massive implications on what happens in the Big Ten. So I hate the idea of going divisionless, first of all. I think that's stupid. And I think this could all be avoided if you just simply stay with divisions. That game really matters at the end of the season between Michigan and Ohio State. Winner gets to play in the Big Ten championship. Typically, now it's not going to happen all the time, obviously, but typically that's a game that has that kind of implications.
Absolutely. And if you move it around, it's still a big game. I don't have a problem with it. I really don't. It doesn't, it could be the second or last game of the season. It could be in November sometime. I wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
All right. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. Now, one of the things that's always going to come into play on this is money and network television. They said the Big Ten signed, a $7 billion deal with TV networks over the course of the next few years. So, they're going to want to have, of course, Big Ten is trying to keep up with the Fox, the big noon kickoff or whatever, as being their marquee game. We touched on it yesterday when the news came out that it's likely that the Michigan State game gets moved to a night game, and that touched off some controversy here on the station because nobody really, well, I shouldn't say nobody wants it, but we can understand it could be a bit testy between the two fan bases, that maybe you don't want to have that game at night, giving everybody the full time to get fueled up and get after each other. And I don't want that, and hopefully it doesn't happen. It's a whole non-story. I don't want to rehash that, and yet can't say that without saying the same thing about the Michigan-Ohio State game. If you're going to move the game away from the end of the season when you go divisionless, why wouldn't that game be the marquee game at night? Because that's the one that could get all the ratings. I mean, imagine the ratings you would get if it's Michigan-Ohio State playing at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night in October. It would be through the roof. I mean, they're already through the roof. They're already one of the, it's always one of the top, 3 or 4 games viewed per year. But if you have it at night, which is something that they haven't done, imagine what the ratings would be. But do they want to do that? I imagine they'd have some of the same reservations about putting the Michigan State game at night that they would for the Michigan-Ohio State game. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. We got some texts coming in. U of N, Ohio State open up the Big Ten with a night game every year. If there's a rematch, there's all year to build up momentum. I think that would be really interesting. I don't have an issue with that, but I don't have any ties to Michigan or Ohio State, so I don't want to speak for somebody else. But I think it's an interesting idea that's worth a discussion, as Ryan Day would say. I'm a big Michigan fan, and who cares when we play? I agree with moving the game. This is just one of Michigan's thoughts. Since Bo passed away, I've always thought that the Michigan State game should be the last game of the year, so I have no problem with moving the game. Well, that's not going to happen. I can't imagine they sacrifice the Ohio State game to put Michigan State at the end, but I mean, I guess you can make a case for it that it would make more sense, I guess. I'm a big Michigan fan. It doesn't matter. Okay. Writing's on the wall. It's eventually going to change, just like the rest of the rivalries in college football. That's from Mike in New Boston. Ryan Day has zero tenure to demand a change to great tradition. Are they afraid to lose twice in 1 year to the better team? All right, let's check this out. First of all, he's not demanding anything. All he has said is that it's worthy of the discussion. And hey, Michigan guy, your athletic director said the same thing, that they should at least discuss it. And it has been discussed and will continue to be discussed. So slow down. And the tradition was great because it used to mean whoever won that game typically was the team that won the Big Ten and got the Rose Bowl berth because they didn't have a Big Ten championship game. But everything has changed since they added the Big Ten championship game. So that's where it makes sense. As a Michigan fan, it would be really hard to move away from Ohio State at the end of the year, but Ryan Day is right in the fact that they are going to be years where Michigan knows that they are automatically in a Big Ten championship game, and the game would have no purpose. Yeah, and the same thing with Ohio State. There are years that Ohio State knows that they're in a Big Ten championship game. Perhaps they both know that they're both going to have that rematch, and this is what they're talking about. I think if U of M and Ohio State fans get to experience the game once in 70 degrees, like in September weather, they would stop complaining. That's from John in Lake Orion. Well, the thought of having it to begin the Big Ten season is interesting to me, or to even have it to begin the season is interesting. I don't like playing a great opponent as your first opponent. And for years, both Michigan and Michigan State had to kind of balance that with Notre Dame when Notre Dame was on the schedule. And Michigan State always tried to have an opponent before Notre Dame. And it seemed like Michigan had some years they would play Notre Dame in the first game of the year. You have to go back to whatever it was in the early 2000s. Was that the last time that we saw that in the beginning of the season to start the season? Maybe not that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. But how did you feel about that? Did you like having a big rivalry game to start the year? Our family has had Michigan football tickets since 1969. I still have them and will pick and go to the primetime Michigan games. Please don't ruin the Michigan-Ohio State tradition. It's now TV greed. Well, as I said, I think the tradition changed completely once you started doing a Big Ten championship game. It's not the same thing. It doesn't change the rivalry. The rivalry's great. But the tradition has changed. Because the tradition was based on that game meaning the Big Ten championship, which meant the right to go to the Rose Bowl. I don't know how many years in a row that's what it was, or how many years out of how many years, starting in 69 to whatever it was to 2000. that game meant that, or to mid 2000s, that game meant that. But it feels like more often than not, the winner of the Michigan-Ohio State game was the team that represented the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl. I was just talking about this a couple of months ago to some guys at work. They're Ohio State fans, and we all agree that it would be ridiculous to possibly play each other 3 times in a row. And we just have to get over the fact that it would take away from the regular season game. That's in Brandon Woodhaven. Well, again, this is another eye roll moment if you think it's going to happen 3 times in a row, because then you're assuming that you guys are clearly the class of the Big Ten. Play each other at the end of the season, Big Ten championship game, and then that you'd automatically be lined up there in the college football playoff. It's not to say it can't happen, because it absolutely can happen. But I do think that this is something that is worthy of more discussion. I hope the Big Ten considers this even more. But I think it all could be solved if you just simply go back to divisions. When you're adding more teams, go to divisions. It makes sense. I don't like divisionless conferences. That to me does not make sense. 248-539-9797 is a telephone number. Got some calls lined up. We'll get to those coming up next here on the Karsch and Anderson Show, 97.1 The Ticket. PJ Fleck, speaking at the podium at the Big Ten Media Days, a tweet from Barrett Sallee. He says, PJ Fleck is operating at the Les Miles filibuster level. Miles used to say something about every single player in his roster before taking questions. I think he wants to eat up as much time as he can before he has to take questions, given what the story broke last night, and something we can get to later on. But there's reports of accusations about the program being a toxic culture that they're having to combat right now. And since then, some players have come out in defense and said it was a hit piece of a story that came out. It's interesting to see how this one plays out. And I just think what it comes down to is that PJ Fleck's just a weird dude. But we can get to that coming up a little bit later. We're talking about the possibility of the Michigan-Ohio State game being moved from the end of the year to sometime earlier in the season. Not that would happen this year, no. But when the Big Ten goes divisionless, does it make more sense to get rid of that game from the end of the season to avoid the possibility of having that game rendered useless? Because if those two teams are at the top of the conference, they'd play for the Big Ten championship the next week. Now, some of you may be rolling your eyes about that, but I mean, you got to admit, it's a possibility. The way that those two programs have gone, the way that they are continuing to be the top of the conference, that you can understand that. Now, sure, people may want to take exception if you're a Penn State fan, if you're a Michigan State fan. We've seen our levels of success recently. USC is coming to the fold next year. They're going to have something to say about it. I get it, but you have to say and admit that it is a possibility. And people brought up some interesting thoughts. Like if you put that game at the beginning of either the beginning of the season or at least the beginning of the Big Ten season, that's some sizzle to start things off. And then, of course, you get into the debate whether or not you need to change the time of the game. But it's messing with tradition, and nobody likes to mess with tradition. I would just say this. The tradition changed. The tradition changed when they added a Big Ten championship game to the schedule. That's when it changed. Because the tradition was based on that game being so big that the team that won that game won the Big Ten and represented the Big Ten in the Rose Bowl. That was the tradition of the 70s and of the 80s and into the 90s and into the next century, of course. Then, things changed. Michigan went on hard times. They went through a couple different coaching changes and it didn't work out. Other teams had their chance to take over and did. But now it looks like it's back to Michigan and Ohio State. 248-539-9797 is the number. Forrest is next up here, 97 on the ticket. Hey, Forrest.
How you doing, Gary?
How are you?
I agree. I very much agree with you on the division thing because it makes it much more. Just mix up the teams in the division. That's what you should have did. But my whole thing, just hear me out. I'm a Michigan fan, but it's the biggest game of the college season. Period. It's more watched than the national championship game.
Well, it can be. It can be if both teams are what you expect them to be. It can be, but it's up there with other rivalries. But yeah, I'll grant that it's certainly one of the tops.
So then you got this is what I'm saying, like Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, all that. Like when you see them play twice a year, it's just not. It's not the same juice as it is when you see. When you got that one game at the end of the year that means so much because normally the top two teams or top three teams and one loss can change everything. You know what I'm saying? And that person can get the bid. So that's what my thing is. Like I like it like that. I like the excitement to wait on that. Like, I can't wait for that. You plan on it almost. You might even make a party around it. It's just a whole basically an event. Because to me it's the most important game of the year. Unless we make it into the national championship game, because it just brings that much excitement around the family and all of that. It's just the tradition about it. That's what I love, that tradition.
Yeah, I hear you, Forrest. I hope that they stay with divisions. They'll rethink that decision to go divisionless. I don't like that at all. And yet, because that makes sure that at the end of the season, when you have the Big Ten championship game, that it's not Michigan and Ohio State playing in the Big Ten championship game. That will have hammered itself out based on the last week of the season. I'd prefer that that's the case. Now, you have the rarest of occasions, right? When you had Georgia and Alabama, they have divisions in the SEC. They don't play each other in regular season. But they did meet up a couple years ago in the SEC championship game and then met up again. Was it the national championship game? And that was a rarity because there were only 4 teams that made the college football playoff. So think about it now with the college football playoff expanding. There's even more of a likelihood that could happen. But at least it would be spaced out a little bit more. But I just wish that the Big Ten would not go divisionless. I wish they'd stay with divisions. I know that it's going to keep expanding and it's going to look awful. And I'm not a fan of this giant expansion and going to maybe it's going to be 4 mega conferences. I mean, there's news that reports are that Colorado is going to join the Big 12, that they're going to get out of the Pac-12. And it's inevitable, right? So that's going to happen. Then the next thing is you're going to have Oregon and Washington probably jump to the Big 10, and then the Pac-12 is just going to implode. There's nothing left. They still don't have a great TV deal. So it's strange how college football is going to totally change and it's going to kind of reset. I wonder what it's going to look like 10 years from now, college football, because it's bound to go through another change and another reset. Steve is next up here, 97 The Ticket. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Gator.
Hey.
So I definitely agree with you. I'm a huge Michigan fan. No offense. I know you're a state guy.
That's all right.
But since I was a little kid, I was a baby. My grandpa, my uncle, I've always grown up Michigan fan. And the one game we've always looked forward to was Ohio State-Michigan game. I understand that I think you're right. The division still should be there because you got to think about it. It's a 100 and plus year rivalry. So to make the game at the beginning of the year or to make it where we play twice, I just think that takes away from the tradition and it takes away from the lure of the game because it's that one game that Michigan fans and Ohio State fans look towards to, and I just think that if they change the divisions, then that game ends up meaning nothing because then you're going to have to probably play twice a year.
Well, you might. That's certainly a possibility, and that's why Ryan Day raised that point yesterday. Yeah, I mean the rivalry doesn't change; it's always going to be the great rivalry, right? That doesn't change. But the tradition started, in 69 when Bo took over? Is that really when the tradition changed about wanting this game and how much it meant because of the end of the season? I don't know. I'm not a Michigan historian. I don't know if it's always been played at the end of the year or if that was just something that happened, in the 60s. But I know that the reason that it became such a great tradition was because of what it meant. Meant that whoever won that game typically went to the Rose Bowl. But that's not the case anymore because we've got a playoff and we've got a Big Ten championship game and things have changed. And, now they're going to go divisionless. So all these things have mitigated what the tradition is. It doesn't mitigate the rivalry. And I think that's what you need to take a hold of. It doesn't change the rivalry. Rivalry is still awesome. So where could you space that out? If you really believe that this is going to happen, that they would play back-to-back games, then you should be all about playing the game at some other point in the season instead of the end of the season. Because it does feel like, if you already know you're going to be playing in a Big Ten championship game, then it kind of sucks. I don't know what the percentages are, what the probabilities are of that happening, but it seems like it would be somewhere around 15-20% that could happen. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. More of your calls and your texts next. We continue to talk about the possibility of at least just as Ryan Day said, we need just to have a discussion, that's all, of having a discussion about changing the Michigan-Ohio State game from the end of the season and moving it somewhere else during the season because you want to avoid having the potential back-to-back games, end of the season, and the Big Ten championship because when you go divisionless, it's no longer worrying about the best team in the East versus the best team in the West. You're talking about the best two teams in the Big Ten Conference. Now, maybe it all works itself out because, USC is great, and Penn State is great, and Michigan State is great, and you got all these teams that are vying for it that you don't know. It's just a jumble at the end of the year. Could be, but I just wish they'd stay with divisions myself. I think you avoid all of this. We'll talk more about that, more about the Tigers game this afternoon. Doubleheader against the Angels. Shohei Ohtani is pitching in Game 1. How about that? Plus, PJ Fleck is speaking. Actually, just got done speaking. And some interesting quotes from him about the allegations about the toxic culture at Minnesota. We'll discuss all that next here. 97.1, The Ticket. All right, welcome back to the Karsch and Anderson program. We got Tiger baseball coming up. About 45 minutes, we'll get our broadcast coverage underway. It's a doubleheader today against the Angels. But lucky you, if you're going to the game today, Game 1, Michael Lorenzen for the Tigers, perhaps making his final start as a Tiger, against Shohei Ohtani. Yes, he's pitching. He wasn't supposed to this series, but Shohei is pitching for the Angels today against the Tigers in the first game. Already having reports that tickets are ridiculously expensive for this game on a secondary market. People trying to get out there. But I suspect it'll be a pretty good big crowd for the first game. And, hey, maybe you stick around for the second game, too, because I think it's a straight doubleheader. And should be kind of fun to see what happens in this doubleheader. Tigers trying to make that final impression before the trade deadline on Monday. Other teams are already trading. We've seen the Giants are making trades. The Red Sox made trades. Heck, the Angels made a trade last night to acquire Lucas Giolito and also Reynaldo Lopez from the White Sox. They're bolstering their pitching staff. They're going for it. They've also said they're not going to trade Shohei Ohtani. Huh? So either they're delusional and thinking that they're going to take one last shot at winning the World Series with Shohei on the team, or, and this is what I would think is true, or they know that they got a real shot of hanging on to Shohei, that they can get him to an extension, that he doesn't have to hit free agency because he likes it in Anaheim and wants to stay there playing for the Los Angeles Angels. Maybe that's the case. But great that Shohei Ohtani is pitching this afternoon, first game of the doubleheader against the Tigers. So if you're heading downtown, enjoy it. Look, it's an overcast day, but it's not going to rain. At least that's what the weather reports say. And there's like a less than 5% chance that we're going to see any rain. And it just looks like it could, but apparently it's not going to. Do feel for the people that are without power, people that went through the storm last night and had some storm damage. There were some serious winds closer to downriver and closer to Detroit than what we got in the burbs. But I saw a report of 75-mile-an-hour winds in some places. That's crazy. Anyway, 248-539-9797 is the telephone. The same number to text us as well. We're talking about, do you move the Michigan game against Ohio State in the future because we're going divisionless? And you want to avoid having those teams playing back-to-back weeks. Perhaps be back-to-back weeks if they play for the Big Ten championship. Because, again, no divisions. You're not, going east versus west. Let's get to the phones. And Crandall is next up here at 97 on the ticket. Hey, Crandall.
Hey, how you doing?
All right.
I believe that the Michigan-Ohio State game should always be played at the end of the year because if either one of them loses during the year, that ruins the year for everybody, at least in Michigan. I'm a Michigan fan. I mean, I look at the whole year as one piece of Ohio State's game. I think Michigan playing Ohio State at the end of the year is like a fulfillment of a whole year of fighting.
But doesn't it change a little bit if they were, because we're going divisionless and now there's a Big Ten championship game, if those teams are slated to play at the end of the season like they always are, but they already know that they're going to be matched up again in the Big Ten championship game, doesn't that take away the meaning of the game? Whereas if you were to schedule it earlier in the season, you don't know how it's going to affect things at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that is accurate. I understand what you're saying, but if Michigan loses, I wouldn't even look at football till next year. Or Ohio State, they lose too many games. The Michigan games, they usually are going to be the top team.
All right, thanks. And people wonder where the arrogance comes from. Some other text coming in. Moving the game is a terrible idea. It might not be a playoff game, but it feels like one. It's exciting to look forward to it all season long. Otherwise, it's basically just a big game. I get that, and that would be the downside to it. My solution is just have divisions, and then you avoid all this. Then that game means even more. You want a chance to play in the Big Ten championship, you got to win that game. Dirty programs like Michigan shouldn't get special treatment. Move the game and get over yourselves. Like, I didn't say that. There was a texter that said that. So in theory, we will just use Michigan and Ohio State. They could play 3 times normal season game, a Big Ten championship, and possibly a national championship. Yeah, or possibly a playoff game. Doesn't have to be the national championship. I don't know what the probability of that happening is very slim, but yes, you can create a scenario like that like you could with any team. As a Buckeye, Day is on thin ice, as is. Just win the damn game and not be concerned with potential rubber match. Hashtag cart before the horse. That's from Eddie in Ontario. I get it, but I mean, he's bringing up what Ward Manuel had brought up last year anyway. It's been brought up before by Michigan. It's been brought up before by Gene Smith, the Ohio State athletic director. This isn't earth-shattering news, but this is the Big Ten meetings, and Ryan Day says it, and it has some meaning because of what's happening in the Big Ten after this season. You bring in USC, you bring in UCLA, and because you're bringing those teams in, you're going without divisions. And when you go without divisions, well, then you know it's interesting who plays in the Big Ten championship game. Well, simply the top 2 teams in the conference. Well, those top 2 teams could be Michigan and Ohio State, and they may play each other back-to-back games. It's a possibility. If you win both games back-to-back, does it matter? Does what matter? I mean, does it makes whoever wins feel pretty great about themselves. The team that loses back-to-back games, maybe it knocks them out of the college football playoff. I would imagine that could be the case. Michigan, Ohio State, you must play at the end of the year. It's the finale of a season war of words and blood. It has been, but doesn't it change because of lack of divisions? I mean, I want somebody to speak on that because that's the whole thing. The divisions, getting rid of the divisions has changed everything. And I don't like it. Go back to divisions. I've been a big Ohio State fan since the early 70s. I was a 77 grad. But born and raised here, no problem discussing moving the game to earlier in the season. No problem with Ohio State game changing. That game has determined the Big Ten championship teams many years. Not a fan of playing the games back to back. Okay, I get that. 248-539-9797 is a telephone number. Chris is next up here, 97 on the ticket. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Gator. Just a quick thought about the Michigan-Ohio State schedule. I'm really glad that Ryan Day brought this up. I had a thought a couple years ago of moving the Ohio State game to the Halloween weekend and then kicking the Michigan State-Michigan game to the end of the year. You can still hold on to that rivalry game at the end of the season, and, it changes,
Well, and then on paper, it's less likely to be replayed in the Big Ten championship.
Right.
In theory. The way things have gone, because Michigan State's on the way down here, or they're a down team right now. I mean, yeah, you could do it that way too. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, it'd be fun to see Michigan State play at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, still hold on to that rivalry game and something to look forward to for the end of the season, and still hold on to your rivalry game weekends.
Yeah, I think the one thing nobody wants, Chris, is nobody wants just randomness. I mean, do you want to just spin the wheel and make your schedule and hey, look, we're playing Indiana at the end of the year, or we're playing, here's Wisconsin at the end of the year, and we're playing Ohio State in week 3 and Michigan State in week 6. You don't want the randomness. You do want to have something set up because it's a tradition and it's a rivalry and it's an awesome rivalry, frankly. So I mean, even I can admit that it's an awesome rivalry. I think it has been a great tradition, but the tradition has to change, in my opinion, because of what's happened with college football now that there's a Big Ten championship game. You got a college football playoff. The Rose Bowl means nothing anymore, and now you're going without divisions. So I think I think everybody should be open to moving that game.
Yeah, I mean, to keep some consistency with the rivalry games in those 2 weekends, but I like the old school traditions of college football, but everything's changing, man. It's all, whether we like it or not, it's changing, and you can start a new tradition right there, All
right, thanks for the call, Chris. I appreciate it. 248-539-9797. More of your calls and your texts as we continue. We can get to the PJ Fleck stuff as well, and what's going on with Minnesota. He's being accused of of having a toxic culture in Gopherland. And he has spoken out about that. Some players have spoken out about that as well. We'll get to that. More of your thoughts on the Michigan-Ohio State game. Should it be moved to earlier in the season to avoid a potential back-to-back at the end of the year as things move forward without divisions? Shohei Ohtani coming to town to pitch in today's game. Actually, the Angels have been here. Got a doubleheader today. Game 1, Shohei is pitching. How do you feel about that? Are you heading down? Does this get you to go to Comerica Park to watch him pitch? Because he wasn't supposed to pitch in this series, and now he is. This is 97.1, The Ticket. Hey, you tired of being tracked online? Well, of course you are. Nobody wants to be tracked, so do something about it. Download the DuckDuckGo app to help block those trackers when you're browsing and you're searching. If you use DuckDuckGo as your browser, you're going to be able to conduct private searches with the help of tracker blockers that help to prevent the spies that are on your searches. You're tired of it, right? You're looking at cars, or you're looking at beds, or you're looking at rugs. Next thing you know, you open up your phone again, and you're inundated with those ads. You don't want those ads on your phone. Keep your searches and your browsing activity more private. Don't delay. Download it for free today or visit DuckDuckGo.com. little bit of news. I guess Garrett Wilson limped off the field today at Jets practice. That's no good. But he limped off. He wasn't like he was carted off, which unfortunately was the case in Miami with Jalen Ramsey. That he was carted off, which looks like an apparent knee injury. Those are the reports coming out right now. Hopefully it's the same situation what happened to Lions earlier in the week with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. It's not that serious because Jalen Ramsey, one of the best in the game. You don't want to see players go down ever, let alone the first week of training camp. That's awful. Haven't even really gotten into the whole Aaron Rodgers news, which was massive. I couldn't believe what I saw last night when it came across the Twitterverse. That, or is it the Xverse? Who cares? It's Twitterverse. When it came across last night that he was taking a $35 million pay cut so that the Jets can sign other players. He had this 2 years left on a deal for $110 million. He renegotiated his contract to make it a 2-year, $75 million deal. That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Now, well, of course, he's still getting paid, whatever, $37.5 million a year on average, which is plenty, but he's giving back $35 million. He's throwing that away, saying, all right, I don't need that. Let's rip this up and give me a new contract, and let's go out and get some other players. And there were reports that Dalvin Cook was going to meet with the Jets. There's a number of free agents that are still out there that could help any team, and I wonder how active the Jets are going to be right now that Aaron Rodgers has helped to free up some money, because that's significant. And I couldn't help but think about two things. A, Packer fans, how frustrated they must be, because perhaps they could have held on to Davante Adams and worked things out with Aaron Rodgers, and they could have had a better run, maybe. This is just a constant kick in the nuts for the Packer fans anyway, the way that Aaron Rodgers has kind of treated them. Although he says, he's just upset with the ownership and the GM. But really, I mean, the fans are the ones that pay the price for that. The other is the NFLPA. I got to believe they're conflicted. On one hand, it's awesome that a player would take less money, want to redo his contract for the sole purpose of giving more money to other players. And I suppose that's how it would be spun throughout the Players Association. Look, this is a veteran player. He's playing the last couple of years of his career here. He's giving money back so everybody else can make more money. But on the other hand, I don't think the Players Association ever wants to see a player renegotiate a contract where he gives $35 million back to ownership, because you always want the players to be making more and more and more so that those average salaries of those positions go up and up and up. And Aaron Rodgers was one of those guys that had a salary that was over $50 million. There's only a handful of those guys in the league. Well, he just removed himself from the list, which was, frankly, this is something that Tom Brady had done for years, taking less money. So does that help the Jets out? You bet it helps the Jets out. Now, it helps the Jets out specifically if Aaron Rodgers is still an elite quarterback. He certainly wasn't an elite quarterback last year. We saw the Lions handle him just fine. Kirby Joseph, 3 interceptions against Aaron Rodgers last year. So, we'll see what he is with the Jets. It's an interesting team to watch, no doubt. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. Let's go back to the phones. And Jason is next up here, 97 on the ticket. Hey, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, I just hopped on, started hearing all these ideas being thrown out about the Michigan, Ohio State, and because these are the top two teams. But, hey, 3 years down the line, I like that idea of moving Michigan State and Michigan, but what if those are now the top two teams, and now we're making the same argument? So I just wanted to hear your thoughts. What would you think about schedule off the preseason rankings, and you have a set schedule based off the preseason rankings, and obviously that's not going to hold true all season, but at least it kind of gives you a consistency in terms of the level you're playing throughout the year.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, but I'm not sure if that's terribly different than what they do anyway. I mean, they don't consider it as much now, But those schedules, I'm not sure how far in advance the Big Ten schedules are made. I think it's within the year. So, I mean, is it something that they could do? They could take a look at? I think now there's more of an impetus to do it because of divisionless football. I like your idea. Right. I mean, if you look at it in a preseason top 5, it includes Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. I'd like to spread those games out a little bit so that they're not played, next to each other, and maybe not at the end of the season either, so that if you have a matchup in the Big Ten championship game, it's not going to be back-to-back weeks. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a pretty good idea, Jason.
Yeah, I thought it would be kind of interesting to be like on the schedule, just say highest Big Ten ranking, second highest Big Ten ranking. So you don't know who it is yet, but once the schedule comes out, you can space it out just like you said.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Yeah. And, when USC comes to the fold here, that's not a program that's going away anytime soon. I'm curious to see what the next iteration is when the time they come playing Big Ten football. They'll have different players for sure. But is it still going to be this well-run machine with Lincoln Riley? I think it will be. So I'm excited about USC coming just from a competitive standpoint, adding another big program to the Big Ten. I mean, that's going to be interesting. And knowing that they're going to be playing, I believe they play Michigan that first year that they're in the Big Ten. And then they play Michigan State the second year. So that's kind of cool. How is that going to work out? We'll see. But I'm all on board with what Ryan Day had to say. That at least the discussion needs to be made. You got to have a discussion about moving the Michigan-Ohio State game to some other point in the season. Have the discussion. You don't have to do it, but you don't have to actually move it, but you need to talk about it and see what makes the most sense. 248-539-9797. Some more text coming in. I'm okay with changing the date of the game. There are other big midseason games and big season rivalries like USC Notre Dame or Oklahoma and Texas. Here's an alternate option. Instead of championship game, call it a qualifier game. Make it a rule that teams in national top 8 do not play back-to-back games. If there are other teams that could enter the college football playoff, they could play that game to gain the conference another team eligible. That's interesting. It gets a little convoluted, but I get what you're trying to do, and that would make it interesting. Hey, look, one of those teams is undefeated. They don't need to play in that championship game. Let somebody else do it. I mean, interesting. We'll see. The Big Ten is just getting ahead of it with the divisionless Big Ten. They are setting it up for a conference champion being named without a Big Ten conference championship game, period. That's Sam in Grand Rapids. I don't think that's the case because money drives everything. And having a Big Ten championship game, that's a moneymaker, my friends. That's a big-time moneymaker. So I don't think they want to get rid of that game. With the number of playoff teams increasing, does it make sense to eliminate conference championship games, although money would probably not allow it? Yeah, I think go back to my previous point about the Big Ten championship game. Money rules, and those championship games get tons of money. But we'll see how everything gets worked out. It's an interesting dilemma to have, and I think Ryan Day bringing it up at Media Day yesterday, it's good to get the discussion going and to see what else happens. I like the idea of, working on the schedule. Maybe you do it 8 months out rather than having to do it the season before or whenever it is that it's done. But taking a look at who's coming back to rosters, maybe you can gauge which are the better teams, and maybe you don't schedule them to play at the end of the season or right at the end of the season, but maybe you could look at something 3 weeks out. I don't know. We'll see. 248-539-9797 is the telephone number. PJ Fleck comments, I got those coming up next, and also more of your calls and texts at 248-539-9797. This is 97.1 The Ticket. All right, so it was a story that broke last night. I saw it about PJ Fleck and that coach at Minnesota. There were some ex-Minnesota players that had described PJ Fleck's program as a cult. This was a story that was on Front Office Sports, and I'm reading this from CBSSports.com, alleging the program's culture is fraught with intimidation and toxicity. Among the allegations are that Fleck interfered with medical protocols by seeking for injured players to return earlier than they were anticipated, and by minimizing the seriousness of some pretty horrendous injuries. This is a quote, according to one player that was quoted by that story. Also talked about a system devised by Fleck called the Fleck Bank, in which players could rack up goodwill to circumvent the repercussions of failed drug tests and other violations. The athletic director for Minnesota, Mark Coyle, voiced his support for Fleck's program, and it made a statement saying PJ and our program are unique. They put themselves out there in new and different ways, but always in a first-class manner. And after nearly 7 years, it's clear to me what makes PJ and our program so successful. Now, back in 2018, CBS Sports said that they obtained a memorandum in which a former employee warned the Minnesota Board of Regents of a toxic culture within the program. The person said, if issues continue to go unaddressed and things do not change, the health and welfare of student athletes in University of Minnesota are in jeopardy. There was an investigation that was launched by Hush Blackwell, which was a well-known independent firm, spurred by the concerns raised in the memorandum. And the investigation largely exonerated those accused of improper conduct while crediting Minnesota's athletic training staff for best practices. So some of the stuff that was going on, I heard the guys in the morning show talking about it, that PJ Fleck would ask for players to applaud when he would come into a room, or there'd be a standing ovation. He had all these acronyms that were kind of annoying. The accusations of the ignored failed drug test if you were in the Fleck Bank and all that. As far as the applauding and stuff, you can type the acronyms, like team together one achieves more, stuff like that. That wasn't one of the ones he had, but he made players memorize those apparently. And he would go up to the players and kind of quiz them. And if they didn't know it, there would be, some repercussions if they didn't know it. But nothing serious. It's team building type stuff. And I totally understand that. It wasn't hazing. It wasn't physical torture or anything like that. And frankly, having players applaud when the coach comes into the room. Now, is that self-serving? Does that probably feed his ego a little bit? Wouldn't surprise me in the least. But I also think that you could take it as this. Coach comes in a room, gets everybody to start clapping, everybody start getting excited because it's time to start thinking about football. When you're in the locker room prior to a practice or prior to a game, whatever, you're just kind of relaxing, you're putting on your equipment, whatever, and you're joking around with teammates, you're just talking, whatever. Coach comes in a room, everyone stands at attention, and now he's commanding that attention. And not only is it for the attention, it's getting that energy level up. Whatever PJ Fleck has done, it's worked. His first year at Western, he was, I think, 1-11. He improved to 8-5, went 8-5 again, and eventually had a 13-1 season with a Copper Bowl bid. Took that on the road to Minnesota, and he's had an 11-win season at Minnesota. He's won 9 games in back-to-back years at Minnesota. He's been very successful. Now, his methods may not be for everyone. They may be hokey, they may be corny, and I think some people think that he's a phony, and that could be. But I maintain, I just think he's a really good coach because he's gotten results. So he spoke today at Media Day, and he said this this is from Brett McMurphy, Minnesota's PJ Fleck, on recent allegations of player mistreatment. Says, quote, "We do not use physical activity to discipline our players. These allegations are baseless. This is a similar story that gets peddled every single year by a majority of players who have been dismissed from the program." So if you believe that, this is just something that happens when you get some disgruntled players, guys that are bitching about playing time. They didn't get the playing time. They didn't earn it, at least according to the coach. They're no longer the program, and they're going to complain about it. Is that possible? It's possible. Will this lead to more of an investigation? I don't know. They've already had an investigation, and they were basically exonerated from it. So you either like coaches or you don't. Don't love all the methods that coaches use. I get it. But this one, I don't know if it's going to carry on or not. This doesn't seem to have a whole lot of legs when you think about it. Some more ticket texts coming in. I had tickets to today's game, but sold them earlier in the week when they said that he wasn't pitching. I'm very unhappy with Major League Baseball allowing this to happen. Well, guys can change who's going to start games. It happens all the time. I find it curious that he's starting against the Tigers and not against Toronto. I think you'd want a better pitcher going against a better team, a better offensive hitting team. Tickets are not expensive. I just got one for $18. That's just to get into the ballpark. I'm sure you can there are tickets like that. We'd said earlier in the show, we found tickets that were there for $22. But Shohei Ohtani's pitching. That's pretty cool. I think it would be a ratings bonanza. Bill in Madison Heights. I'm not sure what he thinks a rating bonanza would be. If that's the Michigan-Ohio State game being moved to earlier in the season. Not sure if anyone's mentioned this yet, but the Tigers absolutely screwed people like me who had tickets for the game yesterday and had them canceled with only today's tickets counting for the doubleheader. I'm very disappointed. That's Matt in Detroit. I don't know what the policy was with the game last night, but obviously the makeup game is today, and it's later this afternoon. It's a straight doubleheader, so it'll take place later. With the playoffs going to 12 teams. Both teams are likely going to make it regardless of that outcome. It's going to lose a lot of the consequence of just move it. That's the Michigan-Ohio State game. Well, we'll see. I like Ryan Day's idea. I think it's worthy of discussion, and we'll continue to discuss it. Tiger baseball next, 97.1 The Ticket.